Hi, folks. How's it going? Just going to share a link real quick and we'll be good to go. Alrighty, we got quite a few people here at this point, so let's get this started. Hi, folks. My name is Keenan Taylor. As I'm sure many of you know, I am a scientific illustrator and fantasy author. I am best known for my speculative evolution project in the setting of my literary work, Kaimere, a realm of enchanted beings, magical beasts, and monsters lost to time. We have arrived at our second Fable of Fai Zhemi fundraiser live stream. Aim of this stream is to increase the art budget for the series. As usual, I will try to answer all stream questions, pay or not. Last time, my aim was to bulk up on the fish roster, as our protagonist species this year is a fish specialist, from our introduction as a tiny predator all the way to an apex hunter in the region. Our focus today is on other members of the wetland cast: birds, plants, and of course, more character art and scene sketches. To be clear, this series is fully funded, no pressure to send funds, and my deepest thanks to those who have. This is just to fill out a bit more of the art roster if folks so desire. I've included links to PayPal and Venmo in the description below. Super chats are also welcome. Thanks again to those who have already contributed. Thank you all for joining, and let's get started. Alrighty. All right, who wants to kick us off with our first question? So good to have you all here. Sounds like we might be experiencing some lags. Is it has it caught up? We good? All right. All right. It looks like we may have resolved that. Okay. First question is, of the first dynasty clades, which in your opinion is the most intelligent or successful? Um, I'd say intelligence wise, that might be the Carbasuchians. I've established that the Zolanitok and the Zishun are both certainly more intelligent than they might appear. But for the most part, the first dynasty clades are not. Intelligence is not something those groups of animals investment in particularly much. I would say, as far as the most successful, I think that's got to go to the Carbasuchians. They are as I've developed more and more of Kyrule, especially, they are very diverse. It helps to be kind of small and generalists, so they're well primed to go on a bunch of adaptive radiation. So I would say the Carbosuchians uh, are the most successful and probably also the most intelligent. So I think they check both boxes. Um, are the tigers going to be featured? I think, as it stands now, most of Fai Zhemi's life and journey is more in the southern part of the wetlands. So she more encounters the red panthers. Um, I might mention, because she does go up north, she doesn't quite go into the jungles of. Let me see if I can kind of up here in the jungles of northern Crescent. She's more down here in the Ceridine proper area is where most of her story takes place. So she's probably not gonna encounter any tigers. They're certainly not going to be featured. I just might mention them as she spends a bit of time up north. I think that's going to be in chapter 3. Have you heard of the amniote footprints in the Snowy Plains Formation in Victoria, Australia? I have not. I am not sure what the implications of that would be, because again, I haven't heard of it. I'm gonna jot that one down though, and look into it after the stream, and I'll try to remember and let you know. Why weren't there harvests before the Devonian? That is a good question. The simple reason is that the portal had not yet left. Kaimere had not sent out its satellite groups from the central hive out beyond. Um, it may have actually sent them out initially in the early Devonian, because my thought is that Kaimere bonded with Earth not because it was the first planet with life that it encountered. It was the first planet with compatible life that it encountered. So there might have been better fits that it just hasn't gotten to yet. There might be uh, closer analogs out there to Kaimere as a planet in terms of its size and what have you. But at this point, Earth life has very much claimed the planet, so I don't think it has the versatility that it would have had initially. But that's why there weren't harvests before the Devonian, was that it arrived on Earth in the late Devonian. Oritaku episode, when that is going to be next year, is going to be the Kurojaku, and the year after is going to be the Oritaku. So that is my plan. Sorry, folks. What part of Chimere's ecology and world building are you most excited to explore further? Well, currently, I've just been thinking quite a bit about the inland sea, because that's going to be next year's big journey, is following a Kurojaku on his migration from northern Nikar. So I'd say probably that's the one I'm most excited to work on, is the inland sea. But I've also, I've always had a lot of affection for Picardia, so that's also got to be up there. Although I have thankfully gotten quite a few opportunities this past year to bulk out between the mastodon and the various Picardian dinosaurs I did in June. So that's been very satisfying. So I think that would be my answer. Is I'm most excited to work on the inland sea. Is Sauropotamus as on site as hippos? I don't think so. I don't imagine they're actually all that aggressive. So I miss I added the wrong name to the ceratopsian I posted last week. It's supposed to be Ceratopotamus, was what I originally wrote down in the script. I just forgot and put in the wrong name. So if you're asking about the ceratopsian that we're going to meet in chapter 3 of the Fable of Fai Zhemi, that they are pretty aggressive. They have a fun little aggressive sequence that we encounter. Probably not as aggressive as hippos of Earth. Hippos of Kaimere are also aggressive, but really only during the dry season. That's when you see them getting really protective of their water sources. Could there be an area somewhere on Kaimere, whether on Kyrule or in the known world, with tar pits as natural traps for animals, akin to La Brea tar pit formation, maybe in southern Arvel? I will be completely honest with y'all. I have not studied much about tar pits. I don't know the context in which they form, but I would guess that there's certainly going to be analogous traps somewhere in Kaimere. I'm just not sure if they would be in the known world proper. That's something I might run by Dominic and see if he has much insight on that, or I could just research it myself at some point. But no plans at the moment. But I'm certainly open to incorporating them. What is the status of your next book? So the next book that I'm probably going to be releasing is the Dragon Rider story. I have finished the Ghost story, but I'm running into some consultant issues with that one. And so that one has been delayed. I might release them at around the same time. It just kind of depends on how things go, but I'm planning to have the Dragon Rider story be the next big thing that I work on when I'm done with the Fable of Fai Zhemi. There is quite a bit of revision I need to do, but I have a solid first draft. So I don't want to give any dates because at this point I've bumped it back so much, but I'm anticipating it will be early next year. How many gods such as the portal are there? At the moment I have how many have I announced? I think I've announced, let's see, we've got the Ushalek, we've got the portal, we've got the Jurassic Island entity, the god I have planned for the mountains of Arvel and Nikar might be 2 different entities. So what, that's 5, and then I'm certainly going to be adding more down the road. So there's going to be at least, I would say, probably a couple dozen of varying size and influence. Specifically like the portal, though, none of the rest of them sent satellites beyond the planet. So none of the other gods are like the portal in that respect, but they each have their own aspects. Where can I send fan art? Fan art I would send to talesofkaimere@gmail.com. And I will post about that in the description of this stream when it's done so that you can refer back to it if you miss this answer. Dino Factory asks, after my birthday, I'm giving myself a present by supporting Kaimere's Little Big Misadventures. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Happy birthday. Is the dominant avian of the Siritic wetlands. Well, in terms of size, that would almost certainly be the black Teratorn, which is a descendant of an unnamed Teratorn taken in the late Miocene that has grown to similar dimensions to Argentavis. I had originally drawn them as a descendant, but I think I'm going to have it be convergent instead. So they're dominant in terms of size, but they're not particularly common. They really only come around during the dry season. I've got a stork that I'm going to be debuting in chapter 4. I haven't drawn it yet, but it's going to be a large descendant of a South American stork lineage. So that one's going to be, I would say, probably qualifies as a more dominant resident. As far as numbers go, well, that's something that I'm part of the reason I'm doing this fundraiser is I've got a fair amount of birds. I want to add probably going to be a lot of ducks. I wouldn't be surprised if when all is said and done, a species of duck is kind of dominant in terms of striking the balance between abundance and ecological impact. So that's my answer to that one. Has the Nanotyrannus paper changed anything of the Tyrant Dynasty? I would say to a degree, perhaps, but to be perfectly honest, I didn't have the same extreme level of mesopredator exclusion, or I guess vassal predator in the context of Chimere's ecology, as had been proposed by the ontogenetic niche partitioning theory that Nanotyrannus challenged. Kyrule and Nikar had Megaraptorids, it had Entelodonts, and it had Abelisaurids as kind of that subordinate apex vassal niche. And so the Tyrant Dynasty already kind of bucked that trend and followed the conclusions that kind of the the ecological implications of Nanotyrannus validity. So honestly, I wouldn't say it changes all that much. Same with the known world. Um, the Megaraptorans I had based largely on Tyrannosaurus in terms of growth, ecology, and ecological impact. But they are now, I mean, I had already had, again, more of those subordinate apex slash vassal predators in Kaimere than had been proposed for T-Rex. So it, honestly, the biggest thing it changes is there's an adjustment in the growth models now. With, like, once you take the Nanotyrannus, the Jane data point out of what an 11-year-old T-Rex looks like and is built like, and their size, the growth curve is a lot less of the kind of this dramatic alteration. Uh, I'm not going to redo those sagas, but it is something that I am thinking about for the robust monarchs going forward. I might have them grow a little bit more gradually and be a little bit bigger a little bit earlier. Um, it stinks that I've already done the Uktan and the Zentaur, who would probably be most impacted by that in the known world. And I am fortunate enough in that the Bakar was already grew a little bit faster and a little bit more gradually because I wanted the Steraconichid Megaraptorans to be kind of a distinct have a distinct growth pattern from the robust monarchs. I wanted the monarchs to stand out a bit in that respect. So thankfully for this particular fable, the Nanotyrannus paper doesn't actually have much impact. It does impact the Kurojaku a little bit, though. You'll note if you're really keen on the growth chart that I talked about in the other two. If you compare the Kurojaku character Taka in his growth, you will note he grows a bit faster than the others. If you ever make sagas for every Megaraptoran, will we get sagas about other predators like the Komukabawe? I'm hesitant to commit to that at this point. I don't know where I'll be, and at this, the Megaraptorans, there's a lot of them in the known world. I've got 7 in the known world, and then I do want to do the Western Megalosaur, Western Carnosaur from the Monsoon Forest of Arvel. And that alone, I mean, is going to take me into, I think, 2030, 2031 when all is said and done. So I don't know where things are going to be at that point. I really enjoy doing these. I think this is a better way to convey the scope of Chimere's ecology. And I would really like to do it in Kyrule because I think that's a more normal ecosystem. The known world has a very artificially inflated biodiversity because of the harvests. And that's going to, Kyrule is going to be a lot less striking in that respect. So I think that might be fun for me to try to present Kyrule as a bit more. I mean, everything's bigger in Kyrule, but it still doesn't have the, again, kind of artificially inflated biodiversity from the constant harvests and harvests favoring new fauna and giving them kind of a leg up. So all that to say, I would certainly be open to it, but I don't know where this is going to go. This has been a very fun series, though, and so I would not be surprised if down the road I did one for the Ketlerek to kind of show off a little bit of Kaishel, Komukabawe, Chakukabawe would also probably be up there as well. I also think the Motomazor would be a fun one to show a little bit of more about the marine ecology. But again, this is kind of putting the cart before the horse. I want to finish the known world Megaraptorans first because I think they will give me an opportunity to show a majority, not every ecosystem in every region of the known world, but it will paint a good broad strokes picture of known world ecology when I'm done with that series. So that's kind of the main focus of this. As for what happens next, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Is it possible that there is a browsing or a mixed feeding adapted horse species in Kaimere, even within the known world, as even during the Cenozoic and quite recent times, these horses were ecologically more diverse? Uh, so the February is going to be my Perissodactyl series. The Lunar New Year, Year of the Horse, falls on a Tuesday, which is super exciting. So I've got a horse episode that has been sponsored for a while at this point, but that's when that episode is going to air. Um, I have not done my research for that episode. Right now, I'm deep in the Siritic wetlands. I wouldn't rule out browsing horses. I think probably in the known world itself, they've likely been outcompeted by more recently harvested fauna, just because that turnover is how. It's not a knock on browsing horses. That's just how the known world works. Pronghorns, um, slinghorns. You know, the turnover has gotten everybody, and I know it makes it look like newer fauna are more evolved. And in hindsight, I don't super love that consequence, but it is kind of a logical conclusion to how the portal works. Um, Hair and beard look awesome. Thank you so much. Your book inspired my love for science. Well, thank you so much. I'm elated to hear that. It's my baby right here. Um, all right. Could something like the Carolina parakeet or axolotl live in the wetlands? Maybe an antiornithian or Carbosuchian mimics. Carolina parakeet, I think probably not. I mean, I guess you're asking more about analogs. Oh goodness, maybe. Again, we'll see how birds come along. I don't have many amphibian plans, but we'll see how this stream goes. If folks really have a lot of interest in adding some more amphibian diversity, I've got a frog, a Sicilian, and that might be it right now. Again, there's only so much I can. It's got to have a cohesive narrative. The first two chapters are when she's pretty small and interested um, in smaller fauna like amphibians. So maybe. Um, as for specific analogs of those two fauna, I don't currently have plans for them, but we'll see how it goes. I really want to bulk up the bird roster. That's, I think, the big takeaway from this stream is I want to include a lot more birds, and so Enantiornithians are going to be a part of that. There's a lot of South American birds, but that's not going to be an exclusive thing, in no small part because birds can fly. So there's going to be a lot less endemism. Um, Speaking of fish, do you have any videos involving them planned for next year, and what older clades of birds, plants are found in these Siritic wetlands? All right, so regarding fish, I don't think I have any fish episodes. No, that's not true at all. I have a jawless fish episode in the works. That's going to be, I don't think I have a date for that one set yet. What older clades of birds and plants are found in the Siritic wetlands? So the Siritic wetlands, just to provide a little bit of context, I'll talk about this at the beginning of the first episode of the first chapter of the Fable of Fai Zhemi. Um, at the beginning of the anchored period, so this was around hold on, are we good on the stream? We're good on this stream. I think that was just a weird thing on my end. Um, okay, so Zeritic wetlands. At the beginning of the anchored period, there was a big faunal turnover. There was a pretty substantial climate shift in the known world, coupled with a release of nutrients that caused a algal and magic bloom. So the Zeritic wetlands had a big turnover. A lot of the fauna is of late Miocene South American origin. A lot of the fish you're going to recognize if you are familiar with fish of the Pantanal and the Amazon. Plants, I think, probably did not experience as much of a turnover. And there were some plants that survived. I've got horsetails in the Suritic wetlands that I debuted in the kind of my initial marsh flora piece. I have had a plan and intention for a lineage of endemic chimeran plants that diverged around the same time as the gymnosperm angiosperm divergence for a while. And I had been hoping to debut them in this series. I don't know if I'm going to get time to really develop that. I got sick in October for about a week and a half. I've always had respiratory issues, so a head cold hits me harder than pretty much anything else. So I got, unfortunately, pretty far behind schedule. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that for this one. If I don't, I could see in my plans for next year's Kurujaku Saga, he starts up in northern Nikar, and I might have a floral section on those endemic plants then. Because I don't want to go in half-cocked. I want to really develop this before I present them. So there's going to be enantiornithians, so there's going to be some older birds. I already have a species of firebird. Snake bird, I think, is what the Cyritic word translates to. But I talked about them in the firebird episode. So I've got two non-true birds, groups of birds in the wetlands, and I might have a few others. We'll see how. We'll see what I get as far as research budget goes. Because at the end of the day, it's a lot easier to just draw a bunch of familiar birds, tweak some colors here and there to make a new species. But yes, I do plan on having a couple older bird clades in the wetlands, as well as plants. How many countries in Kaimere are there, and how many might there be in the future? Oh, interesting. So broadly speaking, in the known world, we've got the Chakati Empire, which is kind of this area here, and that encompasses several different Telmeid nations throughout here. Over here, you've got Kajar, you've got Kadan, the Kaleen peoples throughout here have a bunch of different independent nations. Picardia has currently one nation, the Picardian Confederacy, and then a bunch of independent clans. And then there's quite a few in realms beyond. I haven't thought much about Chimere's future, to be honest. Kaimere is ultimately about, again, the books. So I don't know to what degree I will be developing the future of the project. It's something quite a few people have asked me, but at least right now, it's not really on my radar. So yeah, there's certainly going to be a few dozen different nations of varying size within the known world. There's primarily the Kadanath Republic, the Chakati Empire, the Kadanath Free States, and the Picardian Confederacy. And then the Kaleen peoples don't presently have a unified nation. It's just easier for them to be independent. They do have some pretty complex trade networks. There's a lot of agreements. So maybe if your definition of nation is pretty loose, you could argue that the Kalren and the Eskadine and the Akanuk form a pretty loose nation. Tesuk up there might also qualify as part of that, but there's not. They just tend to prefer a lot more independence. It's really only when there's aggression from the bigger nations that they will unify in kind of a military context. All right. With the Arvella Titans lore from Hyrule origins back to the Mesozoic dynasties to Nikari origins after the dynastic extinction, what changed? Because they wouldn't have settled long enough on Arvel. So the origin of the Arvello Titans, what is their clade? Is it Apsarinidae? So they were harvested, and when they were harvested, they were introduced to Nikar and Hyrule, because for the majority of Kaimere's history, those two continents were pretty close together, and the portal was a bit north of where it is now. And that's where the ancestors of the Arvello Titans were placed. Then when Arvel came up and connected with, because it's kind of in a rotation. So what is now Kajar used to be northern Arvel and connected with southern Nikar, and then it's rotated, and now it's this portion up here. This is hard with the mirror. The mirror image. It's here that's coming to crash up there. So this is what originally connected up to there, and it is Kajar that was the initial land bridge by which the Arvello Titans came south. So I think that was kind of where the confusion came from, was I have described them as being a Arvelith clade, but their origins were in their origins were on Earth, but then they were introduced to Kaimere in the territory of the portal, which at the time was in Nikar. So that's why I think there's a little bit of timeline geographic confusion there, because I've gotten that question quite a bit, so I wanted to take a moment to clarify. That's their origin. That's their arc. Is they started in Nikar, went to Arvel, and the Arvello Titanidae family that Arvello Titan proper belongs to. So they have a Nikari origin. All right. Shining Gander asks, how does the memory of Class 3 homunculi work? How does a being compartmentalize millennia worth of information in their brains? Does everything just start to blur together in their minds as they age? So this is something I talk about a little bit in the final story of my first anthology here. Grimleia is a Class 3 homunculi who is probably 12,000 years old. A lot of it's just a blur. He describes trying to recall earlier parts of his life as like trying to hold water in his hands. It is very difficult to compartmentalize millennia of information. Now they do have magic that kind of helps enhance their memory, and they can I almost imagine it as sort of like a they need to spend some time like asking their magic to help them remember things as like a search engine uh, analog. So they have a certainly a much better memory capacity than we do, um, because they have basically part of their bodies is a supercomputer level of memory storage that the magic helps with. But even with that, I mean, and especially if you're like Grimleia, where he just kind of wants to forget things, so he doesn't care. He's not trying very hard to remember the past. And then you have someone like Mother Maru, from the sixth story, Songbird's Lament, where she's also 10,000 years old. Um, and she almost certainly has scattered memories, um, but they might well be blurred by, stories told to children reinforced over time. So it may well be that she doesn't actually remember herself. She remembers more what she has told her descendants over the millennia. Um, there's almost certainly, again, key memories that she's retained, but like they talk about the name of the leader of the demons, she could be misremembering. It could have been lost to to a telephone game over the ages. I think Voskardlok is the name that the Northern Harpies have for him, but the Assembly and great librarians have cataloged variations of that name throughout the known world, throughout the mythology. So to just because she was there and probably met him or them or her, again, the gender depends on which story you're reading. um it is very hard to say with confidence. Just because a homunculus was there doesn't mean they're telling you accurate information. That's something that the assembly has pieced together. Same with the library, is that yes, they're talking with entities. um the librarian whose name escapes me, in who's a homunculus, again, he was also there. He has an advantage of curating his own catalog of his journals, um and so that makes his memory perhaps more reliable than most. um but you still got his own bias, and his memory no doubt blurs a lot of details, because man, 12,000 years is a long freaking time. All right, next up, compared to Earth and its moon, how large is Kaimere and its own satellite? I don't have. All right, so back in undergrad, a friend of mine uh who was a physics major, he and I sat down and worked out kind of the size of Kaimere. And what I wanted from Kaimere was, what is the largest a planet can be that can still support Earth life? And at the time, if memory serves, we came up with something around 1.5 Earth radius and about 3 times Earth mass, with the idea that the core would be less dense than Earth. That said, I have not looked back over those notes, and I've not. There's a lot more information out there that I can use. To my understanding, there's been some further studies since the resources he and I used. Um, so I don't know if that size still holds true. That is something that I'm open to, kind of downsizing the planet if I need to. It's important to me that the gravity remain broadly the same. There can be a little bit of wiggle room, because at the end of the day, the portal can replicate things with precision and tends to favor that. If it needs to make some slight adjustments to things that it's copying to make it survive on the planet. But I don't want to play too fast and loose with that. I generally want it to be pretty analogous to Earth in gravity. But if that makes the density of the core too light to sustain things like continental drift, then obviously that's a problem, because continental drift is something that's pretty substantial to the project. So Kaimere has an Earth, Kaimere has a moon, and it's larger than Earth. It has a moon because I want the fantasy stories that I write to be, again, broadly analogous to Earth. I want the things that stand out about Kaimere to be the fauna and the magic. I am less concerned with making the planet itself stand out too much, other than the size and scope of it. And I've heard some opinions that don't like that priority for me, but that's just where I'm at. So I do plan on clarifying the size of Kaimere at some point, because I think it's very important to the project. Everything is built off of this planet, so knowing the dimension, and also that's something that the assembly would know. They might not know the specifics of the density. They haven't done core studies on nearly the level that we have on Earth, and to my understanding, there's still quite a bit about our own planet that's theoretical even with that. So it's something I need to figure out, because I think the assembly would have more information than I have presently gone public with, and I want to be able to go public with that. I want to engage with that, but that's something where, I mean, I could just give a fast and loose answer, but I want something that's a little bit more grounded than that. I just haven't had the time to, I haven't allocated the time to address that. So sorry to give a rambling answer that doesn't really answer your question, but that's what I got. What are your opinions on Subnautica? I don't really have opinions. I don't know tremendously much about it, other than the images I've seen look really cool. I've played some video game. Subnautica is a video game, right? I think it is. It's a video game. I'm going to trust my gut on this one. I've played a few video games. I'm running through Baldur's Gate with a friend right now. I've played Mountain Blade Warband and Zoo Tycoon, Age of Empires, and Civilization 3. So I can't say I've not played any video games, but and then occasionally I'll play Drunk Mario Party. Sober Mario Party for sure. But yeah, so I don't know much about Subnautica. It looks very cool from what I've seen. Video games just tend not to be my thing. I much prefer tabletop games and role-playing games. Hello, Keenan. So my first question, how does the portal manage to send satellites and contact life from other planets so fast? So it is in its, we're getting into a bit of theoretical here, because the assembly is not allowed to study the portal itself directly. It is the prevailing opinion and thought that the portal originally could transfer data basically via radio waves, probably around the speed of sound. So the original time that it would take for Earth to say, hey, I'm sending Kaimere some data to print life forms, would probably take anywhere between 1 to 5 centuries. They don't really know. They usually say around 1 century, just to kind of assume it was pretty fast. However, now it seems to be almost instantaneous, and they believe that the first children had something to do with that. Again, the Chimerans are not going to let them study it, but presumably there was some sort of quantum entanglement involved. Again, they don't know the details, but the assumption is that when there was that entanglement, when you tell the Earthside swarm, um, when you know that it is able to communicate, because my very elementary level of quantum entanglement suggests that a stimulus on one is going to impact the other. So I was like, well, maybe, basically typing an email into one tells the other end of its entangled aspects. Can you tell that this is not really my field of much expertise? But that is kind of the idea that I have these assembly um, has as their prevailing um, theory about why it's so fast now. It's not. It doesn't seem to be instantaneous. If they had someone go back and forth, and it took about half an hour to get to Earth and then back to, but the assumption is that that's not travel time, because that wouldn't make sense for the quantum entanglement theory, which might not be true, but that's the leading theory. Um, that it might just be printing time, because that's not instantaneous. Um, so, uh, so that's how the portal sends satellites and collects life on other planets so fast. It didn't used to be so fast, is the theory. The portal might have independently developed the quantum entanglement. That might not have been the first theory, but the first children. Again, this is all theoretical. So if it was entanglement that naturally evolved, perhaps as a, well, if that was the case, then it may have always been this fast. But again, the assembly doesn't know. This is all theoretical. Personally, what is your favorite biome that you've made? Probably Picardia, honestly. I have always had a deep affection for the Adirondacks. That's a area that my family has gone back to. I've hiked all over the place up there, time and time again. And so the Adirondacks influenced a lot of Picardia, and also the temperate rainforests of the Pacific Northwest, specifically in Seattle, where I went to grad school, kind of in the Olympic Peninsula area. Those were kind of the two. That's what Picardia is kind of a some of its drier, more Adirondack type forests. You're going to see more of that in the highlands, whereas kind of the lowlands is more of and especially up in the north. Wow, I'm getting my cardinal directions messy. Okay, along here, where the wind bloweth the water and hydrateth the planet, the island, that section is going to be more of your temperate rainforest. And then along the south there, along this coast, you're going to see more of an Adirondack type environment with maybe a little bit of grassland steppe scattered throughout. So that's my favorite region. I just, from a personal, I just have so many memories of those areas that are deeply affectionate. Um, I would say also, I mean, the Serenic Wetlands is a place I've been really looking forward to visiting. My major field work that I did was in the Everglades, and that is in a lot of ways analogous to the Serenic Wetlands. I've shifted it to be a bit more analogous to the Pantanal, but there's still quite a bit of analog to the Serenic Wetlands, which again, in its original conception, was just the Everglades, because I had just studied there and loved it. Let's see, that was a long time ago. That was before I had transferred to Geneseo, so I want to say that was 2008. Wow, that's a long time ago. But yeah, ever since then, the Siritic Wetlands has been up there. But I think at the end of the day, Picardia is just going to be, it's always going to be at the top for me, just for my own personal affection. Um, Inland Sea is a classic. I also love the Inland Sea. When we were in the Everglades, we very briefly went over um, a seagrass meadow, and I was just enchanted. So I think you're going to see that in a lot of Picardia as in a lot of Kaimere as you dig in. You're going to see just places that I visited and fell in love with. My family traveled a lot, um, just because my dad was in seminary, and that involves a lot of hopping. And also, I was a little bit of a dorm room accident, so I may have come along a little early. Um, all that to say, I've traveled around quite a bit, and you're going to see a lot of the regions I fell in love with scattered throughout Kaimere. Um, are there other names for Kurajaku, considering that it interacts with a lot of different cultures? Absolutely. So I probably shouldn't have Kurajaku as the name I give in the Siritic Wetlands, because Kurajaku is a Picardian word that is their term for the creature. And you're not really going to encounter it elsewhere. I think I have the primary Siritic name for it here somewhere. I don't want to spend too much time looking, but it is in Drowned in Water and Blood. Do, 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 do. Your people call them Genkar. So Genkar would be the Siritic. There's a bunch of different Siritic languages, but kind of the prevailing dominant Manao based language. Um, so maybe I should put that in their profiles, but I felt like at this point people know what the Kurajaku is, and that might just confuse more than clarify, if that makes sense. I probably should add that to the text though, um, of the series. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where uh, how I want to clarify that. But to directly answer your question, yes, there is a lot of different regional names for the Kurajaku. It's found in the freshwater wetlands, is where the throughout the known world. That's where the females nest and defend their territories, and the males are found in the open seaways. A lot of males. There's resident and transient males that we'll get to in a little bit in chapter 3, I think, is when I talk about that. But yes, so lots of different names for the Kurajaku. That just happens to be the Picardian one, and that's the one I use the most, because in the Lost Hellfighter they encounter a Picardian Kurajaku. And so when I went public with the project, it was as I was working on the third draft of the Lost Hellfighter, and so that's just the one that stuck. I have their name in the common tongue as Enyedord, and I've never liked that. It just, I don't like the word. Doesn't sound right. I might change it because my boy deserves better, but I don't know. Well, all that to say, yes, there's a lot of different terms. Have you ever read about any other big spec projects like Serena? Serena? I don't know how to pronounce it. Probably should at this point. No. When I my development process is that I have I think of it as like a pool of inspiration that is largely built from folklore and from the natural sciences. Um, and I am very wary of accidentally drawing inspiration from someone else's project. Now, there is influence in Kaimere from other properties. Dinotopia and Narnia, I would say, are the biggest kind of a combination of those two concepts is where Kaimere originally came from. Kind of once it became a full world. When I first developed Kaimere, it was just the island of Picardia in the Bermuda Triangle. And then once it became a planet, that was very influenced by this idea of, again, a combination of Narnia and Dinotopia. So I can't sit here and say like the whole thing is original. It's not. Kaimere is not. It didn't come out of in a vacuum. It absolutely had its influences. But when I went public with Kaimere, I think it was what, 2018, 2017. I think that's when I mean, I bet the project is 20 years old, and I've been writing in Kaimere for pretty much that whole time and doing creature designs and what have you. I think 2018 was when I first started making social media accounts. Before then, I only had Facebook. Um, that was when I made my Instagram and my DeviantArt and all of those other things. And pretty early on, a lot of people said like, "Oh, so this is like Serena." Um, and I wanted to avoid um, adding that project to my pool of inspiration. That said, when Chimere's more developed, that is top of my list to check out. I have heard just so much exciting, you know, designs. I love Dylan's art style. Um, I've seen quite a few creatures from Serena. I think fundamentally it seems like the core seed world concept is probably the only major similarity, but I still am wary of that. I want Chimera really to stand on its own. I don't, you know, I again, feel silly when it's ultimately derived from what if Dinotopia was in Narnia. But whatever. I am, especially at this stage in my development, I really want to have the main influences of Chimere be folklore and natural history. And so that's why I have not read those projects. It's certainly not a knock on them. I'm very excited to when I get to that point. Um, I you know, yeah, that's my own personal philosophy. I don't have any issue um with those projects. I'm looking forward to reading them when I am at that stage. Um, so with the new Nano Tyrannus paper you mentioned on Instagram, how much will our little old Tyrannosaur Nehamu gonna change? Um, well, I've had some amendments in the works for the Nehamu for a while. I have an episode sponsored for them. It is my hope that it will go live next year. We will see, but probably. Um, how does Nano Tyrannus influence it? I'm not sure it's going to influence it all that much, honestly. Um, I guess it's just something I'm gonna figure out when we get there. The biggest change that I'm thinking is a geographical shift. I might be moving it from Southern Arvel up to Northern Nikar. And if I do that, then I might have one encounter our Kurajaku next year, which I think would be fun to kind of have my Nehamu episode be one of the many leading up to it. I've got November's already planned for what those prelude episodes are going to be. But yeah, I might have the Nehamu up there in some capacity. Um, is there going to be a ballad style story taking place in the Crown of Kyrule? As I am unapologetic about Mesozoic bias, I want to see a story take place there. Um, well, first I need to figure out what the ecology is going to be up there. I have my plans for the apex predator and a lot of the major cast, but they're not finalized yet. I do have a Crown of Kyrule episode sponsored. I don't have a ballad up there yet, but I'm certainly open to it. Um, How do you name your animals locally, commonly, and scientifically? Why do different animals have the same name tar at the end? What does that word mean? Great question. So for the scientific names, I defer to ancient Greek. I have an ancient Greek dictionary somewhere. I just moved around a bunch of stuff in my office. It might actually be upstairs. Most of my scientific names are derived from ancient Greek. I took a course in ancient Greek and I took 2 courses in Latin. All basic stuff, but I got like a simple vocabulary list. I certainly wouldn't say I'm fluent by any means, and this was also like almost 20 years ago at this point. But that's kind of the foundation of a lot of my scientific names, and I would say probably around 60% of them are ancient Greek. 30% are Latin, and the remaining 10%, does that math check out? Yeah, it does. Math, also not my specialty. The rest of those, I like to sprinkle in common names of Kaimere or mythical names from non Latin slash ancient Greek influence. So that's kind of my process is um, trying to emulate a lot of the early scientific name trends. Um, the assembly is very much born of kind of the Enlightenment and a lot of the classical venerating uh, Georgian Victorian gentlemen scientists. So that's the air I like to give the names, the scientific names rather. The common names, the local names. I've got about a dozen conlangs that I've developed for Kaimere. None of them are fully developed languages. The Picardiant common tongue and the um, Amenetran common tongue of the Amentanoidiasia, as they call themselves, or the Free States of Kadan, Kadan, whatever regional variation you like. Those are the most speakable, the most robust, but I have a basic sense throughout others. The common Cyrillic tongue, for example, is the one that a lot of the names that you're going to be encountering in the Fable of Fai Zhemi are based on. Um, that one, the words tend to end in vowels, and there's a lot of the a sound that's really only found in that area, which is a zh sound, which I've chosen to romanize as a ZH, kind of inspired by, I think it's Mandarin that has a lot of that. So a lot of those names are not going to be like a one for one for Mandarin words. But I think a lot of people have already noted and will continue to note that there's kind of a similar um, vibe to the vocabulary of a lot of these Cyrillic wetlands, um, which so yeah, so the Cyrillic Telmeid, that's kind of their primary language, has that. So, and as for why different animals have the name tower at the end, what does it mean? That means large dinosaur, basically. Um, in Amanetrin, in the common tongue. And I'm probably going to have the Kurajaku name instead of being Enyudord, because Dord is another term for that. Um, and uh, so that's why you're going to see Tar at the end of a lot of um, large dinosaurs is in the common tongue of Amanetran. uh, that's just that word means. So I think Kotar means. Oh, does that mean sloth drake? It might. I have not looked at this vocabulary in a while. I'm sorry, folks. Um, Zentar, I believe, means western drake. Um, I don't remember what the Uktan name is in the common tongue, but that one also ends in tar. I think that one just means northern drake or maybe prairie drake. I would need to look at the document to say that for sure. Uktan is a Dolani, which is one of the many Shu languages. Um, so Uktan is not in the common tongue. In for common names, I tend to like to give the common name for the regional language, not just the common tongue. Um, but so yeah, that's it's kind of a condensed response to that. Condensed Lamau. Has the new evidence regarding Nanotyrannus changed anything with your lore? Not really, as I've mentioned. Really fascinating implications. It changes the growth rate, as I mentioned before. But that's about it that I plan. Um, but thank you for the question. I'm very excited about it. I wish I had time to draw and talk a bit about Nanotyrannus. I think that would be a fun episode. But right now, again, with getting sick last month, um, I'm cramming for time. So I might do that in December because I'm now done with the script and I will start recording that this week. And I've got a lot of art done. I will get a lot more art done this week if I can finish all of the chapters um, by early December. I would love to do kind of a Nanotyrannus discussion. But honestly, Dr. Napoli and the Skeleton Crew are going to give you the best info out there. And I know Dr. Napoli already has one video out. I think they have another. They have a Nanotyrannus stream. I don't know. I know they're planning on doing a big episode over at the Skeleton Crew. So I would watch that space for sure. Any I, anything that I discuss about Nanotyrannus would just be through the lens of Kaimere. I was aware of the Nanotyrannus stuff for a couple of years now. I didn't know quite the scope of it. I think my understanding of it was that some of the some of the specimens were Nanotyrannus, some were not. I didn't realize that that was going to change the growth rate. Would I have changed anything about Kaimere? Probably not. Um, I don't want to. I'm not going to break embargo for a fantasy project. That'd be awfully silly. Um, so you know, it hasn't really changed anything, I guess, is the trying to give concise answers here. But it is something I want to talk about and draw. I really would like to draw these two different Nanotyrannus species. We'll see where that goes. Are the people from the Dragon Islands Chimerans or a different species of human? They are a different species of human. Around 100 to around 1,000,000 to 100. Oh, wow. Whew. Hold on. I'm going to have some coffee and then talk numbers. Okay. All right. So between 1 million and 600,000 years ago, there was somewhere in that time, the assembly doesn't know exactly when, there was a radiation of Homo erectus that had developed some sort of seafaring capacity, the degree to which is not known. They reached a whole bunch of different areas. They settled the Permian Islands, the Permian continent, Kyrule, um, Kaishel, and many islands throughout, and developed into a wide range of different human species. Um, the degree to which they were influenced by Homo sapiens that came later is debated. But they are, by most assembly scholar opinions, distinct species. The Permian Island people probably are the same species as the Permian continent people and possibly those on the Jurassic Islands. But they might. It is debated, and it's something that I really want to do a human species of Kaimere series to clarify a lot of this. I would love to go back to my alma mater at Geneseo. That they have a really robust uh, uh, skull cast selection, and my advisor for undergrad is a human evolution specialist. So I would love to chat with her and iron a lot of these details out. Again, my um, uh, human evolution biological anthropology knowledge is primarily about a decade old at this point. My undergrad major, one of my majors was in anthropology, and so I knew quite a bit about it then, but honestly, I've not revisited a lot of that then. All that to say, Dragon Island Chimera peoples, humans, are a distinct species. That's not really going to come up in the Dragon Rider story, honestly, because um, they only know their own human species, so they're not going to really remark that much upon other aspects. We have met another human species in the second anthology here. Um, the Maku are kind of a taxonomic nightmare. Um, so, but and then in the third anthology, Beyond the Known World, we're going to meet the Tlaten of Kaishel. We're going to meet. Um, uh, we have a story where we're going to meet a couple different human species in Kyrule. So there's a lot in the works as far as that goes. But yes, the Dragon Islanders are either their own species or part of a human species found in the northern hemisphere of the planet. Have the Blackfish Islands been notably impacted by climate shift 1.5 million years ago, and the subsequent Southeast Asian Sahul harvest occurred during that time, and southern Arvel was very devastated. Yes, there was a map. So there we go. So that right there is our Blackfish Island. Their name for it escapes me, and I'm also not remembering the common tongue name for it. So we're just going to keep calling it Blackfish Island. So they were devastated by the climate shift. It didn't hit quite as hard as here in the South, but it was pretty rough, and a lot of the native megafauna perished. However, it is outside of the territory of the portal, so it didn't harvest anything there. So that region has part of the I think they've got mastodonts as their big thing, and they've got a couple other things planned that I'm very excited. I have an episode sponsored for them, for that island's ecosystem. It's going to be filtered through the lens of the assembly has not been able to really properly study the area because the one expedition there ended in tragedy. So I'm looking forward to kind of filtering their knowledge through the lens of like, well, we got some drawings. Depending on when I have that expedition takes place, maybe they even got some really rough photographs that would be fun to to work out. But all that to say, there's not a tremendous amount known for certain, but it does like there have been none Zippo Zilch fossil studies. So any prehistory of that island that I present would be conjecture, which again, I'm excited. I really enjoy that lens of uncertainty. So I'm very excited to explore that area. But yes, almost certainly suffered a pretty major mass extinction. If Grendel is a homunculus on Earth, does that technically mean the Seelie and Anceli and other fairy courts are chimerans? That is the prevailing opinion of of the assembly is that there's a lot of our myths and folklore that was influenced by stuff from Kaimere, be it Chimerans themselves, because they've been present at least since the Bronze Age, possibly earlier than that, and certainly older than that in the form of the first children. And a lot of the first children made homunculi on Earth, and then when their civilization collapsed, those things escaped. That's where witches, vampires, shapeshifters of Earth originate, was from uh, first children shenanigans. Probably don't want to say that though, because the assembly likes to think that they're natty, all natural, homegrown, God-given magic. So I wouldn't. That theory is not most frequently discussed, but in the interest of a bit of fun transparency, I'll tell you that much. So yes, there's a lot of influence um, on Earth folklore and stories that is just from the first children experiments. It has nothing to do with the members of the assembly. Are the large ceratopsians still canon to Hyrule? Yes, absolutely. My current plan is that a lot of ceratopsids went extinct, and a lot of smaller ceratopsians got to kind of radiate. And for right now, my plan is that the only true ceratopsids are going to be in southern Hyrule on the Western Peninsula. That's going to be it. Everywhere else is going to be smaller basal ceratopsians that got big. There's work that I don't know if it's published, but it's going to have some fun implications for some creatures that I had planned to incorporate. But I am not sure. I should look into that at some point. But yes, so I've got some plans for the Kyrulan ceratopsians in the north, the like weirdos, the I have a Paraceratherium inspired protoceratopsian that I'm really excited to flesh out. I did a sketch of it, I think like 4 years ago at this point. Maybe it wasn't that far back, but all that to say, there's a they're still canon and they're still in the works. I just only so many hours in the day. Would there be a new harvest anytime soon? That is entirely dependent on what happens with the portal, because right now it can't harvest. It is trapped. And so there's no planned harvests anytime soon, but who knows? We'll see how things go in coming literary works as far as that's concerned. Oh, good, excellent. You saw my note about the fan art. But yes, I will try to remember. I'm great at remembering things, folks. What is the most efficient marine predator in Kaimere? Efficient. Oh gosh. I mean, the boring answer probably is going to be a baleen whale, because nobody has a kill count like a baleen whale. Nobody comes close that I can think of off the top of my head, and that's an empirical fact. To try to answer your question in the spirit with which I'm sure you intended, I mean, orca gotta be up there. Yeah, killer whales probably are up there just in terms of the sheer versatility. But the mosasaurs might as well. I mean, the nice thing about the mosasaurs is that they're, the catapan-seated mosasaurs especially strike a really nice balance of agility and power. They have a tuniform build, so they're excellent at acceleration and efficient speed. But they've also got the big flippers and kind of uh, uh, an ability to pivot and turn that a lot of tuniform animals don't have, and they have a relatively flexible neck as well. Um, so they're pretty busted and able to go after fast prey and powerful prey and agile prey with kind of a they're not going to be as maneuverable as kind of the sea serpent mosasaurs. They're not going to be as fast as a swordfish or maybe a tuna. Um, they're not going to be as intelligent or versatile as a killer whale. But the catapan-seated mosasaurs, like the motomazor, are. I mean, the reason that they're dominant is because of that kind of like not min maxed, but have 8 out of 10 in every stat kind of build. Um, so they're a very versatile. So that I would say that's probably what I'm going to say as far as their most efficient marine predator. Although I'm going to stand by the whales though. I think that was I enjoyed that answer. Um, Ooh, hey, how's it going, Peter? Good to hear from you. I'm only just now getting to your statement that you made it. Um, in light of the Nanotyrannus comeback, which Nomen Dubium would you hope to be made valid again? I don't know. I mean, obviously, Scrotum Humanum is going to be the funniest option. I don't think anything comes close. I know that there's a push to make Centarsus valid again. I like Megapnosaurus, big dead lizard. I think it's funny. Um, so yeah, that's I would say I want to keep Megapnosaurus, and um, I don't see any reason to genuinely go for Scrotum Humanum, because to my understanding that's relatively confidently Megalosaurus, and we should keep Megalosaurus. Megalosaurus is awesome, and we should not invalidate it. Um, and I don't think they would, because it's one of the 3 name holders for Dinosauria. Or has it officially been changed to what, like the Triceratops and Sparrow? I don't remember. I don't know. Anyway, we shouldn't get rid of Megalosaurus. That'd be silly. Um, if you need duck info, I got you, dude. Yeah, no, I'm gonna be bothering you about ducks for sure. I might even do a full page of ducks. We'll see how the fundraiser goes. That would be fun. Um, since ammonites in your setting keep waters clean, does the Siritic wetlands have very clear waters in places where normally it would be covered in algae? They are going to be a factor, yes. I I have some changes that I plan to make about the ammonites down the road. I think the Siritic wetlands are by and large still quite eligible for what I had planned for them, but I think they need at least some elements of their lives to be marine. So they're probably going to be transitioning into something a little bit more like what I've got for these the trident scorpions, where they are seasonal visitors of the Siritic wetlands when things flood, and you can just walk in there and it's great. A lot of cetaceans, the river whale, for example, is kind of a migrant that comes in during the wet season, which is between 6 and 8 months of the year. So that's a lot of time to forage and clean the waters. But I think beavers probably help keep the at least southern waters of the Siritic wetlands more clean and clear than the Ammonites do. Um, so the fundamentals of that lore is going to stay, but I think, like for example, I gotta I gotta at least reevaluate what I had planned for the. I think the biggest issue is the Picardian Great Lakes, um, because at least with the Siritic wetlands, that's right next to a gulf. There's a lot of saline water that the Ammonites can kind of spend what they need to. Um, I think it's at least to mineralize parts of their shell, but they might also need it just for respiration, which and like metabolism balancing. It's something I need to look into. I've gotten some feedback about them that makes me want to kind of polish that up. I don't want to throw it out just because someone on the internet told me it doesn't work. That is not the philosophy by which I world build. But I do, I want to come at least half correct, shall we say? So that's something I'll probably be revising a little bit down the road. But I think the Zeritic wetlands are still going to have some. I don't mention any at the moment though, so I might incorporate that. I just should get a note going. Um, oh, thank you. I got some funds sent in. Very much appreciated. And thank you all so much for those who have done the super chats. This is very exciting. Um, talk about ammonites. Add description. All right. What goes on in the islands between Kaishel and Kairul? Could there be some relic fauna there? A skull island analogy could go hard, especially since V-Rexes give me a Bellasaur vibes. Yes, absolutely is there's going to be some fun things throughout those islands. Um the reason for their name, um well, I do have quite a few plans for what's going to go throughout that region. Unfortunately, humans, not all humans impact fauna of Kaimere quite like Homo sapiens do. Um, but there's still going to be a lot of human caused extinctions on a lot of the islands that the Homo erectus arrived at. Um, they don't all treat wildlife quite like we do, but a lot of them do. Um, yeah, Skull Island's V Rexes also gave me a Bellasaur vibes. I assumed that's what they were until I later heard that they were supposed to be T Rex descendants, but I don't know. I really want to get my hands on that Skull Island book. I read it. I like skimmed it and read a couple segments in a Borders at our local mall when I was like 13 years old. Um and and I think my mom asked like if I wanted it for Christmas and I was like nah. And now I'm like what the stupid decisions. I should have said yes because then I could own a book that now runs for like $300 on eBay for a used copy. I'm not always the best and brightest, folks. Do you ever plan on making a Notso Kidyu or Scry video like you did the Mana font? The Mana font was sponsored, so that's why I did that one. I would certainly be open to it. There is a lot of development I need to do for them. I want to expand upon tool use and culture. There's a lot of different languages I want to have them have. So there's just so much that I need to do for the non-human fonts. They are certainly not done developing. Um, I've got a character in the next anthology that's going to be I believe he's a Notso Kidyu. In one draft, he was a Scry, but I don't think that timeline aligned. Um, but they will be featuring a lot more in works down the road. Do you ever plan on making videos? So yeah, no plans at the moment, but I'm certainly open to it. Does Hyrule have similar reptilian fauna as Earth? Um, there's a lot of similarities. You're going to see a lot of the broad strokes clades. There's turtles there, there's lizards there, but those are competing with rhynchocephalians and carbosuchians and other similar fauna. Um, so it's not going to be as ubiquitous uh, as we primarily have on Earth. Will any arthropods from the Siritic wetlands be seen in the Fable of Fai Zhemi, maybe as trilobites showing up in the Kurajaku big documentary? I know mostly absent in the Siritic wetlands. I've got, I think at most I mention that there are some little trilobites that she eats, but I don't remember if that segment made the cut. I've when doing these, I write a lot more than I know I'm going to include, because at the end of the day, I want it to be an engaging narrative. I don't want it to just be like, and this day, Fai Zhemi ate these three things. I want it to. There's a little bit of that, but that's really just to give a scope of the scenario. There's going to be some arthropods I feature in at least minor capacity in the early chapters. She's not going to bother with them when she's older. But a downside, I can only fit so much. I don't presently have any plans for them, but I don't know. I might work that sequence back in some capacity. One that I had originally thought about doing for a trilobite is now one of the native fauna of the planet. And I really want to keep that sequence in. It's silly, but it's fun. Was the Oritaku who broke his toe in the Hunt and Trickster's Gambit a reference to the Ballad of Big Al? Absolutely, it was. It was a kind of a throwaway line. I didn't think anything of it, but I've a lot of folks have noticed, which is fun. But yes, that was the inspiration behind that line. For the average fisherman in the Siritic wetlands, what are the dangerous animals that are most commonly encountered? Well, Bakar really suck, because they're going to walk up to you, they're going to take your fish, and they're going to go. And if you want to stop them, it's going to be rough. And we get to see a little bit about what might happen in the fable if that happens. Because yes, there's certainly crocodiles, and those are dangerous, but the Bakar is very tall, and so it can just look into your boat and pick up your net of fish. So if you fight them, they'll fight back. So Bakar might actually be among the most dangerous, but that might just be because I just wrote that sequence a couple days ago, and so it's fresh in my head. What's your favorite little creature you've designed in recent memory? It's got to be that silly little suction cup native magic thing that I made. It's silly. It's based on a weird suction cup thing that I saw at an Airbnb we stayed at. It was not as sketchy as I thought it was at first. But yeah, those are silly. They're fun. I like them. I think that's got to take the cake. I just drew a little crayfish last night, and that was a lot of fun. I like crayfish. Caught a lot of them as a wretched little swamp child, as I'm sure many of us did. Or maybe I'm alone there. I can't imagine I am, though. Keep monarchs still. Yeah, I might keep the monarchs as they are. It just makes them a little bit more unique compared to tyrannosaurs, instead of just a heavily derived concept, especially since with the prolonged juvenile stage of the Megaraptorans, I think I built an idea around them that I'm quite fond of. This idea that the juveniles kind of partly stay as small as long as they do in order to increase the survivability of young from generations past. So yes, Zentaur really only look after their young for the first year or two, but they still generally take care of them for the better part of a decade and allow some of them in their territory, because the more older ones of varying increments you have, the better the survivorship of your young. So you might only have one or two of your young survive the first nest, but a female Zentaur that's now been a mother for 15 years is going to have really reliable survivorship by the end of it. Um, and that's not something that that's something I came up with on my own. That's not derived from those theories about why baby T-Rex were little for so long. So I might just keep that as is. And so yeah, maybe I won't change that much. I think I might still have them grow a little bit faster, but not so much that I feel a need to change the the Ballad of Kahai or the Fable of the Saga of Tanira and Baru. Yeah, so I might just keep it as is. When the project started, you often gave very widespread distributions to many animals before you took into account their skills of spreading to the different natural barriers, climate, and seas. Part of that is because I used to have um, it's beyond this map. Never mind. I used to have northern Nikar and Arvel connected with a land bridge, and my idea was that that there would just be a lot more dispersal. But once I separated that and said that land bridge only formed 1.5 million years ago with the very low sea levels, um, so there's still some crossover that has happened in the past, but yeah, I changed a lot of the distributions. What species will you need to be split into several species? Can you give an example? I am likely to make the fireback at least two distinct species. 1.5 million years ago, in such a dynamic ecosystem and such a dominant niche, is a long time for the fireback to remain one species across two continents. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. I've also just cut a lot of the distribution of a lot of animals rather than splitting them, um, like the Nikari unicorn used to be. Gosh, I think that used to be in Picardia and both continents, and now it's just a small forest in northern Nikar. Um, so a lot. So that's an example of one that I'm going to split into two species almost certainly. Um, how much are they going to change in design? Probably not all that much. Because I like the fireback design as it is. Um, but their populations would be different. Um, how did you develop the Chimeran language? The it A lot of the older names are relics of when I was developing the project of Chimere in high school and a little bit in middle school. But as far as the languages go, in sophomore year of undergrad at Geneseo, I took a linguistics course where making a conlang was our final project. Um, and so my Picardiant was that junior year? That might have been junior year. Anyway, Picardian was my final project. Again, it's not a speakable language, but I built up a few hundred vocabulary words, um, and I made the sentence structure, the a lot of the grammar, what have you. Um, it's got enough that you can speak basic things in Picardiant, and I use those notes and that premise to build Amanetra in the common tongue, and a little bit. Um, I've now got the foundation of about a dozen. I've got 2 Arvelith languages. I've got 4 Telmeid languages, quite a few different bases for, I think, 4, maybe 5 Kelline languages at this point. Yeah, yeah, 5. And then Kadanath and Kajarith. And there's a lot of vocabulary interchange, a lot of borrowed words from Amanetra, and that's part of why I was like, I need to do the common language first, the common tongue first, because that one has the widest influence on other languages. Um, for example, the no, that's not a good example. I think the Picardian word for steel is an adjusted term from the Kadanath, because the Picardian tend to prefer to use bronze because it's such a wet environment that patina is fine, but rust is a real issue. Um, but then when they've gotten some kind of rust resistant, refined alloy spring steels incorporated, those are all things that are introduced from trade. And so I think they have their own word for iron, but not for steel. They can make steel. It's just, again, not usually worth the effort, especially if you're someone who lives for thousands, for hundreds and hundreds of years. Having bronze is just better, because if you chip your knife, you bend your sickle, you can just throw it in the fire, put it back in the mold, hammer, hammer harden the edge, and it's good to go. Whereas steel, yeah, it holds an edge better. Yeah, it's a stronger metal, but again, if you're bushwhacking for decades upon decades, it's going to take on a lot more rust. And that's an example of the language development that I have. Is I try to look at a lot of real languages to see trends and things like trade, religion, war is going to disseminate words that influence the languages at play. um I don't want any of them to, there's going to be some inevitable similarities in sounds, um in no small part because a lot of the Chimeran languages are just going to be playing with the same toolkit that we do. I I have some glottal stops and other noises, vocalizations in a few different languages that I have incorporated in early documents, but since the books are presented as a translation, um, I've trimmed out a lot of those because, and maybe I want to work them back in, but in general, I want this to be presented as something that the assembly has translated to be readable and speakable to humans in their own communities. Um, I don't know. So all that to say, the development of Chimeran languages is something I really enjoy. I'm not as passionate and locked in on it as Tolkien was by any means, but um, I would say Chimera is more of a world built from its ecology than a world built from its languages, like he made. Um, but I like languages a lot, and that's something that I plan to develop more. Just again, only so many hours in the day. I need to make it at least enough that I can give my characters and creatures names. That's kind of at present what I need out of the dozen or so languages I developed, if that makes sense. Um, maybe someday I'll make them fully developed and speakable, but at least right now, um, uh, that's just not really in the cards. Another Nano Tyrannus question. Again, my thoughts are, I've said them earlier, but they're not particularly robust. I defer to Dr. Napoli and the Skeleton Crew. They've got a good handle on the matter. Are we going to get a big badass Dragon Rider dragon battle in the Dragon Rider story? Because that'd be rad as fun. Yes, absolutely. There's a very fun sequence that I had a lot of enjoyment working on. That is a the dragons don't. Yeah, no, the dragons fight. There's some dragon fighting. There's a dis, the dragon rider story itself is maybe a little bit different than a lot of dragon riders. I don't know. I don't want to get too much into it for spoiler purposes, but yes, there's going to be a big dragon fight at the end of the second act of the Dragon Rider story. I shall develop an immortality serum so that you can make a saga for every Chimera and large predator. That would be very fun. I would love to have I just want more time. There's just so much I want to do. I want to develop a Chimera and role-playing game. I want to throw myself at this channel and do so much more. And I also want to write so many books. I have so many stories that I want to tell set in Chimera. I've got a novel series. I've got a whole lot of novellas that I've started. I've got a bunch of anthologies. I want to write stories from animal perspectives. It's just so much I want to do. But yes, I would love to do a lot more. All right, I've got a lot of questions. I need to start cooking. Oh goodness. Okay. Yeah, no, I need to start accelerating. Okay, let's go. Question: can you make an Enantiornithian birds in this season? Yes, I plan on making at least one or two Enantiornithians in my bird run that I'm going to be diving into with whatever I make from this live stream. I've got character art I want to make. I want to do scene sketches. There's lots I want to do, but birds and plants are kind of the focal point of this fundraiser. So yes, Enantiornithians will be on the list of all the kings of Hyrule, which has the relative highest chances of a person to survive encountering. Oh, off the top of my head, probably the Chakukabawe, because they're more intelligent, they're more selective. A Kumukabawe, the giant dromaeosaur, yes, they're specialized in sauropods, but if you're around, like they're not picky. And oh boy, is the Ziphanodon, the Tikakatik, not picky. They're probably the most likely to just grab you if you move. Maybe the Bokodu. Some of them like to hunt humans, but they're generally not going to attack a person if they aren't, a similar story to the Uktan species. During the development of Kaimere, do you have something you regret implementing or some revisions on current stuff? Regret implementing? Honestly, no. I think my approach that I've had in the past couple of years of being comfortable with revision as I go has been very freeing, and this lens that I've taken with the channel of this is what the assembly currently thinks and it's not locked in has given me a lot of versatility. um I think in a perfect world I might wish that I had done more ground up development, again, as kind of like I talked about with the planet earlier. um But do I regret it? I don't think so. The Kurojaku statue there. That was done by Steve over at Paleo Analysis. I am very fond of that guy. Um, Steve's super cool. You should check out his channel. I'm sure a lot more of you are following him than follow me, but you know, he's got some fantastic stuff. Great guy, and I think it's his birthday today. So happy birthday over to Paleoanalysis. Are there any species in the known world that chimeras have either hunted to extinction or accidentally drove to extinction? Certainly, regional populations. Local species, if nothing else. Um, Human impact is something that I do grapple with a little bit because the impact of Homo sapiens appears, to my recollection, to be a lot more substantial than other human species. What are the reasonings behind that? That's something I plan on looking into um, down the road. And would that apply to chimerans who were 250,000 years ago? They're in our species, debatably. Um, Anatomically modern humans is generally the term, but it was that pulse, like I think 50,000 years ago. That seems to have been a lot more devastating. Um, so to answer, I don't really know what the extent of species driven to extinction by humans is going to be when all is said and done. Um, but there certainly have been. In the known world, there have definitely been lots of regional extinctions. Obviously, Kajar is the most famous one by the first children, but the Chimerans have also done their fair share. I'm sure the Colleen uh, drove a lot of island species to extinction. They tend to not go into island interiors. So, like Calren here, um, the Blackfish Island, some of the larger Tasuk Islands are likely, the Colleen don't have the level of impact there, but they've certainly on smaller islands driven some local species to extinction. Can the dodo survive in Kaimere? It could if it was replicated in the right place, but it wasn't. They've never found any dodo in Kaimere. I got a weird one for you. When witches travel to and from Kaimere, does the portal reconstruct their magic cells, or does it replace them with itself to save on energy? It tries to make a copy of everything. And so theoretically, it is an atomic copy of the witch. So there would be copies of their magic. Theoretically, yes. Any Temnospondals coming out for Kaimere? Not in this current series, unless of course you count amphibians writ large as Temnospondals, which I think is the prevailing opinion right now. I know that there are dissenters to that theory, so I don't want to speak out of turn. What is your favorite amphibian of Kaimere? Well, right now I only have two, I think. But I really like these Elena if we're including Carbasuchians in that, and debatable. What weapons did the first children use? Do they have some analogs to firearms? Some broad analogs, yes. I did an artifact piece on some first children weapons for, I think that was in the Age of Demons episode, although that was the archaeology. So they had some, but primarily they like to use magic, mind control magic being their go-to. Aside from the ratite-like Enantiornithians of Kaishel and Kyrule, are there modern birds or other enantiornithine clades, which somewhat convergently evolve to Mo or elephant birds. None that I've developed, but um, the known world is not a great place for a lot of island fauna like that, at least in the known world proper. Because the portal, if it notices as it's doing harvest that the island is impoverished, it's going to add fauna there. And so you're not going to see a context that is favorable to the likes of the flightless birds getting large. Now, that said, here kind of beyond the territory of the portal, that's where you're going to see more areas where, especially like 1.5 million years ago, a lot of these islands lost their native fauna, and birds may have kind of gone to an analogous elephant bird route. That seems to have happened a bunch of different times independently on Earth. Probably also is happening on Kaimere. Certainly beyond the known world, you're going to see a lot of islands that have their own small bird lose flight, get large trend. All right. Thank you so much for the contribution there. Very much appreciated. Are there any animals that you want to put in Chimera but can't justify it based off ecology and evolutionary history? I'm sure there are, but to be perfectly honest, like through the power of convergent evolution, I've managed to uh, add in a lot of creatures that maybe I couldn't quite justify. Like, for example, Megalania, I didn't think it would really work well in the known world, but I have an opportunity for a giant lizard to make do in a slightly different context. So that's an example of how I'm often able to make do just fine. In your episodes on Toxodon, it was mentioned that Sparacidons were pushed to extinction, although lately we've seen a lot of them. Is there a specific reason that you've changed it? I think that was me misspeaking because I looked over this script, I think, and I believe I had originally written that it was large Sparacidons, because when they that was one of the first harvests after the dynastic extinction, and so Sparacidons became pretty large dominant predators, but most of those went extinct. Now there's one weirdo that's like um, small, like mid-sized, and then most Sparacidons are now kind of marten-sized or smaller. So that the lore that the big Sparacidons are extinct still holds true. I think I just misspoke in that episode. That the clade overall did survive, but they've just the big heavy hitters are gone. Now there's no apex predators that are Sparacidons. It is just weasel looking critters. And we'll meet one of them in the Serenic Wetlands episodes next month. Is it possible that a Mesonychian is present on Kyrule, taken in the Oligocene harvest, in a scenario similar to the Leptidian of Kaimere? Confession time. I don't know what that is, so I'm going to look it up real quick to remind myself. Are those like are those ungulates? Oh, yes. Okay. They were in the early Oligocene. Those might have just been Asia, though. I mean, I'm maybe, but they probably didn't stick around. If memory serves, I have looked into this group and ruled them out. Yeah, I mean, it's possible that they survived past our fossil record of them and were harvested for Chimere, but they're not. I don't plan on including them. Is the bestiary of the known world still in the works? I've 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 put a bit of a hold on it as I'm doing a lot of artwork and development. I still plan on it, but I can't in good conscience say it's still in the works because um I mean I'm doing a lot of work for it. A lot of the artwork that I'm making for these fables is going to be incorporated into it. Um so yes, I'm working on it, but not actively at the moment. Speaking of South American birds, are there any gannets, inhingas, frigate birds, etc. in these Seritic wetlands? Yes. I have mention of I think two species right now in the text. I haven't drawn them yet, but I'm it is that is going to be part of the birds that I'll be drawing uh after this stream. Alrighty. Have any episodes on animals in Kaishao or the Southern Oceans been sponsored? I don't believe so. That said, Anthology 4 is going to be set in Kaishel, and so I'm sure for promotion and prep for that, I'm going to be discussing that region a lot more and certainly expand upon it. I'm still sad that stegosaurs have no representatives remaining at all, even in the Jurassic Islands. Alas, um, not everyone makes it. I am encouraged to see that I've seen some other projects that appear to be giving um, stegosaurs their due. So I'm happy to see that some other people are taking up that mantle. What plans do you have for Argonite? If you're willing to give some spoilers, is Picardia really going to one day go to war with Kajar? Um, my so the anthologies are primarily to show readers the current status quo of the known world, and the novel series is when I break that status quo. Um, and Argonite is going to be a player in the novel series. He's also got a story in at least, I think, every anthology that I have planned is going to have something with him. Um, as for if Parkardia is going to go to war with Kajar, time will tell. Let's leave it at that. Depending on what kind of narrative you want to discuss with the setting, do you think it's still possible for an elephant bird to survive in a non-island environment? I will confess I don't know enough about them to make an informed response to this. It's my understanding that probably not. Um, but maybe something like an elephant bird. But if we stretch that definition loose enough, then like emus, I think, are invasive in a lot of different places and doing just fine. Ostriches survive with a lot of the most dangerous animals of modern times and are, well, one of the species is doing great. Um, but yeah, so I would say yes, broadly speaking, but I think elephant bird themselves, uh, they're the natural selective pressures for them were deeply informed by the fact that they were on an isolated island context. So I doubt it, but that's not again a knock on them. That's just the context they were specialized for. Have any relatives of the jackalbird managed to colonize the Seritic wetlands? Um, I had not considered that. I plan on having them have numerous species all throughout here. I mentioned them in the seventh story of the first anthology. Cute mentions a firebird, and that's a species of jackalbird. Um, I don't think they're going to be in the Seritic wetlands, though. They tend to like things a little bit chillier. Um, have any relatives of the jackalbird? I'm surprised oviraptorids aren't around at all. I think the known world just hit them really hard with a ton of small avian competition. But I do plan on them being in Hyrule. I just haven't developed them yet. So they'll be in the project, and they might even be in Northern Nukar. Um, they just aren't going to be in the known world itself. Um, do the Ceritic wetlands have any kind of big proboscideans? No. No, they don't. Um, I'm still not sure if I want to include the rhino or not, but I don't think the common Oliphant gets there. And even if it did, I might just mention them, but I don't plan on giving them any screen time. They got a lot of love uh in Tanira and Baru. Are there any secretary birds around? Yes, I believe I mentioned them in the first anthology. But yes, yes, there's at least going to be relatives. Um, is it fine that I make my own chimera and creature? Sure. Go for it. I'm happy to see fan creatures. I'm not going to incorporate them into the project. There's a number of reasons for that, but I strongly encourage folks to explore uh, their own concepts. I'm not sure if I'm reading YouTube much at all. The party. Um, um, I certainly should look into Twitch. I just haven't yet. I understand it's a better platform for the sort of thing I'm doing right now, but I've already got a YouTube channel, so it's a lot easier for me to just do this. That's a good point, though, and I know that a lot of people really like Twitch and working with it. So I won't say that I won't do it down the road. Just at the moment, YouTube right now is just a matter of me clicking a few buttons and talking about something I love. I think Twitch would be a fair bit more work to get prepped. Um, could there be kiwi birds or relatives in Kaimere? We know they only reached New Zealand during the Miocene and had an unknown mainland fossil relative. Um, maybe. It's not something I'm going to rule out. I'm not going to incorporate them into this project, though. Um, are there any living Spinosaurids still living in Chimere? No. I may have a couple hold on a little bit into the Tyrant Dynasty, but for the most part, the arid period toward the end of the Cretaceous really did a number on them, and they are, they've had a resurgence in the animals we will meet uh, in the form of the semi-aquatic megaraptorans. We've got 3 species in total of these semi-aquatic megaraptorans that we will be meeting um, in December. But yeah, no Spinosaurids are planned at all in the project. That clade is extinct. With a potential caveat, but not in any exciting way you're thinking, that there may be some studies that suggest a potential ancestor of the Solophosaurs might be a really basal Spinosaur. But again, that you're not going to look at that and think that's a Spinosaur. So, and you did say Spinosaurid, so I think we're going to say no. What inspiration took you to the cultures of Chimere? Personally, I don't get why people obsess on creating a fully new culture in their fantasy world when there's plentiful amount IRL. Normally, I think it is perfectly reasonable for fantasy projects to make like fantasy England, fantasy Somalia, fantasy China. I think that there's nothing wrong with that, especially if you want to add fantastical elements to celebrate your own culture. I think there's a lot of really cool potential there, and it's a great way to celebrate um, all sorts of modern and historical cultures. However, for Kaimere, because it's connected to Earth and very, very directly and explicitly, I early in the project, I had a lot of the names and languages uh, were ancient Greek or Latin based, because those were the languages that early on I was most familiar with. Um, Early when I was working on the project, um, but it was a suspension of disbelief that I found quite silly to think that um, that Latin would independently develop both on Earth and Chimere. That just felt very silly as soon as I gave it a little bit of thought. So I let go of that and developed my own languages because, again, these people have been here independently and it's directly connected to Earth. Now, um, I think for most fantasy projects that aren't connected to Earth, there's no reason to go through all that extra rigmarole. It's not necessary. Um, Are lycopsid trees in Kaimere still? What's a lycopsid tree? Mm, ooh, those are cool. Um, Probably in some capacity. Um, I don't have any set at the moment, but we'll see. Um, the car redesign looks peak. Same for the LR as well. Thank you so much. I'm very happy with my new Mega Raptorans for this series. I'm very excited to show off the various character art that I've got for them. Um, so hear me out. In my head canon, a theropod that lost its limbs to hunt like a snake but kept its feathers, a Quetzalcoatl in Chimere. That is very fun. I like it a lot. Um, I had, I think it was a pterosaur that I had explored losing its flight. This was I want to say very early in the project's development, probably 15 years ago. I probably still have art of it somewhere. Um, but it was like, what if Quetzalcoatlus evolved into more of a proper um, namesake? Um, I let go of that plan. I've let go of a lot of ideas over the years, but that was a fun one. Um, did you get the name Chimere from a word chimera, or did it just come to you in your head? Um, Chimere is courtesy of Bananagrams. I took a selection of letters from the bag, laid them out, rearranged them to make a coherent word because I think the very first one was a bit weird. Like there were two consonants that didn't mesh well. But yeah, the Chimere comes to use is sponsored by Bananagrams. That's why I keep that on hand. It's fun. But yeah, that's where Chimere came from. Are there any species of monotremes in these chapters? Not in these chapters. I might mention the platypus. I don't remember what I had their range as. Because primarily by that point in the harvest, it was mostly focused on Arvel, I believe, by the time it got to Sahul. Sorry. But yeah, I think if I have one, it might be the platypus. I just don't remember off the top of my head what their range is. Wonder what limitations of magic are as of right now. I'm wondering, could they analyze a person's brain and make a ghost based on these scans of memories and such? Funny you should say that. Well, let's first talk about some limitations. Um, as far as the assembly knows, time travel is not within the capabilities of magic. Um, Trying to think of other common magical tropes. So, like, there are prophecies, but the validity of them is very dubious, and it could just be a almost like a predictive AI prophecy instead of something that is actually looking into the future. Because there are prophecies in Kaimere, but again, it's unlikely that magic actually has the capacity to do that. I'm trying to think of some other magical tropes, but nothing's really coming to mind. True teleportation appears to be beyond the scope of magic, but again, there's just so many things that kind of like that. The predictive prophecies, like the portal itself, um, that are not technically that, but it certainly seems like telekinesis is another example where like magic isn't actually like magic is doing the heavy lifting either through magnetism or um negative buoyancy, that sort of thing, positive buoyancy rather, chemical manipulation. Telekinesis is not actually you lifting something with your mind, for example. So I think there's a lot of things that magic can do in Chimera to work around and give you the simulated effect of what you're imagining. And it tries. You're as a witch, your magic tries to do what you ask it to do. Um, but there's a lot of limitations. As for your question about ghosts, that's basically what the ghost in the ghost story that I've written she was a witch, her body died, the magic in that witch carried on, and she had memories of her life as human. She often presents as human because that's the body she remembers. And a little peek behind the curtain, uh, witch and vampire and shapeshifter magic is domesticated magic that is imprinted to a host. And when that host dies, the magic can't just like usually can't just pivot to a new body. Usually it just dies. And Welkin, like as I've described in the undead episode, um, that's another thing they do. They just keep their body going even though the body's dead. Um, put a pin in that for episode 3 of the Fable of Fai Zhemi. But yeah, so there's that's basically what ghosts are in Kaimere. It's the magic of an enchanted being where the magic retains the memories and appearance, um, and desires of the people there it was bonded to, and carries on. Um, so fun question. Thank you. Pursuant to story that I hope will come out early next year. Since cockatrice are limited to southern Aravel and easternmost regions and only seasonally like Zentaur, does that existence of some animals such as bearded vulture and Tasmanian devil be a thing? Um, I don't fully understand the question. I think it's just like, is there a niche opening for those two? Maybe. I do plan on having some small marsupial predators, and maybe a relative of the Tasmanian devil could fill that niche. Um, if someone is making their own spec bio seed world and their creatures kind of copy your designs and our ideas for the sake of science plausibility, how would you feel about this? Would you want to be mentioned? I think it really comes down to intention, because at the end of the day, like uh, large theropods repeatedly converged on the same body plan from independent ancestors. Similar story happened with a lot of ornithischians. The something that I've gotten increasingly interested in is it seems like a lot of animals that we once believed were all related, like iguanodontian hadrosaurs, are now just being like now it seems like that's less of a unified group and more like a pachyderm, where it's just this is what ornithischians look like when they get big, unless they're ceratopsian, I guess. And so if that's, if you've got speculative megaraptorans in your design, I don't own megaraptorans. That's um, and the idea that some of them might be interested in fish or aquatic prey, Joaquin Raptor appears to suggest that at least some crocodilians. I don't know if that crocodilian is an aquatic one. I have not read the paper yet. I've been too busy. It is something I want to check out though. See if it's known. All that to say, if you're just making your own things and they happen to resemble Kaimere, I think there's a little bit of inevitability to that. I would not be at all surprised if people have independently created very similar concepts to a lot of my creatures, because a lot of my creatures are real animals convergent with real animals from other creatures or inspired by mythology. The Dicynodont owl bears are an example where I wouldn't be surprised if someone else looked at a bear bodied beaked animal and came to a similar conclusion. But if you are explicitly having them be based on Chimere's creatures, that's a different story. Then I would say mentioning that it's inspired by my work would be appreciated. And if you're making money off of it and selling it to a big corporation, then we have a whole other legal conversation to have that no one wants to have right now. So we'll leave it at that. Will Chimere's moon be able to support its own life forms? Or will it be barren like our own? Oh, that's fun. I had plans for some native Chimeran life being on the moon at one point. I don't know if that's still going to be the case. I haven't revisited that idea in like 15 years, and this is honestly the first time I've thought back on it. I don't know, probably barren, honestly. I want it to be very analogous to our own. I'm open to exploring some ideas. If having some native life on the moon doesn't compromise how the moon interacts with Kaimere, I might do it. But I don't want it to, like, if bearing life would necessitate it not interact with the planet the same way, then I probably wouldn't do it, if that makes sense. I've been wondering about the planet size. Thanks for clearing that up. Yep, it's something that I hope to clarify. If the planet gets smaller, the known world will remain the same. The dimensions there, it would just I would shrink the other continents as the planet gets smaller. But I've the size of the known world is way too baked into the stories. How long it takes Argonite to sail in the story that's going to be in the third anthology is very tied to the dimensions of the known world. So that's not going to change no matter what. What might change is how big the planet is around it. And if I make it smaller, then I probably will say something to the effect of the prevailing opinion of the size of the planet was wrong. That's something we see in our own history, is that lots of people independently calculated the size of the planet, but that it didn't always agree with doctrine, and there were varying opinions. So, yeah, it could certainly fluctuate, and I can use lore to justify inconsistencies in that respect, which is part of why I'm not explicitly saying what it is right now, because I want to take the time to come correct, if that makes sense. Would making an episode on the fauna of Kajar in modern times be good after getting the broad ones in the pre-first children fauna and the interrupted harvest to make a comprehensive view of its ecosystems and currently fleshed out species you to develop it. I'd be open to it. There's very few episode subjects that I would not be open to. It's just at this point I have a pretty substantial backlog of sponsored episodes, and I want to prioritize those before I explore episodes subjects that aren't sponsored. I know that there are exceptions here and there. I don't have a human species of Kaimere episode sponsored, but that's probably the big one that I would try to look into. Yeah. All right. I need to start doing some rapid fire ones here. What species of humans exist on the permanent islands? I don't have a name for them yet, at least not off the top of my head. I might have one in my notes. But there is one human species. I wonder if you watched or heard of Scavenger's Reign. I have not heard of it. Your project has made me more comfortable in using extinct clades on my own fantasy project. Product Dracopedia, which involves a lot of realistic interpretations of mythical creatures. That's fantastic. Good for you, and I'm very happy to hear that I'm part of the chain of inspiration. Are there any other planets in Chimere's solar system? Yes, I have. It's got 7 planets instead of our 8, 9, depending on if you're a science denying Pluto lover. So yeah, Chimere solar system has 7 planets. I worked out some names and dimensions that I haven't looked at in a very long time, and I might revise them. So stay tuned, but the plan is to have 7 planets. If the portal manages to escape, it's going straight to work, going for revenge. Well, that sure is a concern. Does the portal just straight up kill anything it's transporting? If so, less a portal, more of a copy paste swarm. The essential dread of passing through the planets must be immense. The assembly doesn't know and likes to defer to not being existentially pessimistic. So maybe. Again, they're not allowed to study, but it certainly seems the most logical conclusion. Earlier, I asked about why the initial evolution migration of Kyrule to Arvel of the Arvelo Titan, as explained in the Mesozoic dynasty, was changed. What was the reason for it? I don't think it was changed. Again, it started off in Nikar Kyrule and went down to Arvel by I think 100 million years ago. I don't remember exactly when Arvel touched ground in Nikar early on when it was Kajar that did it. So I'm not entirely sure about that one. Sorry. Are there distinct animals in the Arctic continent, or is it barren? The northern continent is at least going to have some coastal fauna. It does have a circumpolar current, so it is a lot icier than Kaishel, which has its currents broken up, and so there's a whole coast with warm currents. But the planet is still a lot warmer than Earth, so there's a lot of patches of coast that could support life. But the extinction and cooling period 1.5 million years ago and other extinctions prior certainly did numbers. So it might be that it's primarily coastal flora and fauna, and only a little bit on land. Kaimere must be super close to Earth if it speed of sounds takes 1 to 5 centuries. Rough math tells me. Oh, yeah. All right. Well, then it might be quite a bit further than that. I think I had based it on light years and just not really given it much consideration beyond that. So it might be that it's it might be that the traveled faster than sound. I don't know how plausible that is. Um, Something I might work out in the future, but at the end of the day, honestly, since this is all assembly theoretical, um, it probably is. That's a fair point. I didn't. I was just speaking off the cuff there. It's entirely possible. Then, um, maybe it took a lot longer than that. Maybe it took a lot longer than the few centuries that it's usually presumed to take. Um, Again, all theoretical here. Does Kaimere have any biomes that are dominated by fungi? None plan at the moment. I certainly like the idea, but I'm just skeptical given how um, overwhelming plant status quo is. Are there any large ceratopsians in Picardia? I'd originally planned a group of shield drakes be up there, but I'm increasingly less confident that that's going to be the case. So probably not. There's already quite a few big things up in Picardia, so I might just let that be a mainland thing. Um, Outside of modern clades, are there any amphibian clades in Kaimere? I don't plan on any non-modern groups. What are your thoughts on the trailer for Prehistoric Planet Ice Age? I'm extremely excited. I've heard some criticism of some of the designs. Um, I respect that. I appreciate that there's some weirdness there, but personally, I don't really care. I'm just very excited. It looks gorgeous. It looks exciting. It looks like a great time to be a fan of ground sloths. There's going to be a lot of really cool designs there. I'm very excited. I haven't gotten Apple TV for the month yet, but that's on the agenda so that I can watch that. And I don't know if I'm going to have time to review it. I've gotten a lot of requests and to know my thoughts about it, so I wouldn't be surprised if I ended up reviewing it down the road. But that might be more like a mid-December thing after it's been out for a couple weeks. Got to finish the Fable first. Would it be cool to have Chimeran dinosaurs to be modded into games like Jurassic World Evolution 3 and Prehistoric Kingdom? I think that would be super awesome. Has my blessing. I don't know what kind of work. I'm sure a lot of work would go into that. So has my blessing. I don't know. Been tempted to mod. Hi Stormcrow, good to see you here. JP3. Yeah, no, I would love to see some modded chimera creatures in these games. Again, I don't play them, but it would be very awesome to see. I love the hand-drawn picture of the Zentaur fighting the Terror Bird. One of the best illustrations I've ever seen. That was by World of Atlas on Instagram, and it is gorgeous. Unfortunately, World of Atlas is not coming back this year. They've got another project in the works that they're working on, so I'm happy to start promoting them once his stuff comes out. But for the time being, that artist is not coming back for the Fable of Fai Zhemi. But yeah, no, that piece was fantastic. Most Chimeran Sophonts would definitely be eligible for Omnitrix transformations, though the homunculi, I don't know what that means. How did the Neotenic Tarbosaurians and Alioramines coexist during the Tyrant Dynasty? Did they occupy different areas, like Tarbosaurians in arid areas and Alioramines in forested areas, or niche partition? I imagine the assembly doesn't know to what extent they may have niche partitioned. I know that niche partitioning is a real thing, but there's a lot of niche crossover, a lot more than I think. I remember in an ecology course I took, that was something that the professor said is like no animal shares a niche with another animal. And just that notion is quite prevalent and just doesn't seem to be true. There's just a lot of niche crossover, especially when you're a larger generalist, like Tarbosaurines and Alliaramines would have been. Like I think if you're a niche specialist, like let's say an ii, there's not going to be two species of ii invested in the same narrow type of food. Um, just but when you're talking about something big, like often large predators like these like half-ton tyrannosaurs, they're going to be much more individual specialized than species specialized, is my understanding. So like I wouldn't be surprised if there were general trends of some of the Tarbosaurians more in one area and the Alloramines in the other. Um, but it's not something that is as strict. And again, the fossil record of Kaimere is not super well preserved, so the assembly doesn't really know. But broadly speaking, I think they probably were fine, and partitioned a little bit, but it might have been more individual than species level partitioning. Um, Quick question: what happened to Unenlagines? Did they die off, or were their kin just not transported by magic? Um, They were almost certainly in Kaimere at one point or another. The Firebirds were going to be Unenlagines. Um, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but uh, I have some plans for some of them in Kyrule, so we'll see. I just don't know yet. Um, Quick question: why is there a bear in Africa? Um, is this about prehistoric planet, or is this about Kaimere? The Atlas bear was at one point the ancestor of the Uku bear, but I've since let go of that lore concept. Um, Literally the first time donating to someone because it's worth it. I enjoyed the Centaur story a lot. If I have fan art, where can I send them? Please send them to talesofchimere@gmail.com. Thank you very much for your support. I deeply appreciate it. Um, could first children still be alive on another planet? Um, the assembly doesn't want to think about that. So let's go with a definite resounding no. It's terrifying. Why would you say that? Um, which Earth culture most inspired you to create the cultures of humans and Chimera? I generally try to not base Chimeran cultures on real cultures. I like to begin the process by looking for commonalities. A lot of it I initially build kind of from the environment. So like Picardia, for example, has a lot of inspiration from Maori, from uh, indigenous peoples of Great Britain, from Japan, from uh, a number of indigenous American peoples. Um, Looking at commonalities of people who live either on forested islands or kind of more insular forested regions. The Haudenosaunee were influential in their governing system, for example. So I try to not have it be one culture as a direct analog, but it is often very helpful to start there. Now cultures are not entirely dictated by their environment, but there's often through trade and war and religion, um, a lot of various other influences there. So that's another thing in Picardia, is that there's a lot of influence from the sea peoples, the Kaleen, and the during the Mercantile Age, the Kedalaneth had a lot of trade with them. So as the known world became more interconnected, that is something that I've tried to factor into it. But when I'm doing the baseline of the culture, kind of starting it off, the Kaleen, for example, I took various Polynesian peoples were influential for them. Again, also a bit of Japanese and British influence went into them. When I was developing the Kadroth Republic and Chakati Empire, I'm looking at what are some commonalities, some cultural trends that are preludes to these various contacts. The Telmeid that are now occupied by the Chakati, very different cultures there as well. So I don't have a one culture that inspired. I really try to look at common denominators. What do people who live in wetlands, how do they tend to go about uh, architecture? Are there religious trends? Are there, you know, and then again, religion disseminates. There's various religions that have, Christianity started out in a warm desert and is now practiced in cold uh, islands. So there's going to be all sorts of exchange and trade, but um, that I don't have a culture that most inspired Kaimere. I really try to make a conscious effort to, as I'm developing them, look for, again, the key that I look for is common denominators of people that live in similar contexts, and build from there. That's the root of my process. How diverse are parrots in the known world, and are they in the Siritic wetlands? Parrots definitely are going to have quite a bit of diversity in the known world. The Siritic wetlands, I imagine, are going to have a pretty wide variety of parrots. By the principal harvest of the region, Miocene South America, 6 million years ago, you're going to have a lot of psittacid parrot. Let's just go with a common name because I don't know the parameters of of parrot clade names. So yeah, there's going to be some parrots for sure. Um, do other Mylodonts exploit alcohol like bull hukelgore? Probably not to that level. It helps to be big enough that you can open a barrel on your own. Are there any live bearing fish? Absolutely. That's going to be something that I talk about, is a coelacanth species captured at the very beginning of the series, has eggs inside her, but if she made it to birth, they would be live bearing. So yeah. How do the Shu view the Uktan? What do they call it? Um, Uktan is, again, a Dolani, a Shu word for the animal. So that's what a lot of them call it. Um, would you do a video about the various groups of Shu at some point? I would love to. I have a ton of notes on the various culture groups throughout Kaimere, with the Shu being one that I think probably has one of the most diverse language groups. It's a very wide ranging ethnic group, the Shu. So they're gonna have a lot of different languages, and that would be fun to do an episode on. I don't have any sponsored. I do have uh, a series on capital cities and some other human focused ones some other culture focused ones in the works. Not that specifically, but I would certainly be open to it. Have any fish species been domesticated? None planned at the moment. That's not something I'm going to be exploring in this series, at least, but I'm sure there have been fish domesticated in Kaimere down the road. I feel like they seem pretty bad. Isn't the man that got his horse killed and mount stolen from an Uktan a Shu? Yes. The Shu are not universally horse riders, but a lot of them are mounted nomads, and Uktan really like eating horses. So there's some tension there. Have the merfolk domesticated any aquatic life from Stormcrow? Yes. Yes, tentatively, almost certainly. I just haven't developed it yet, but I think that is a very almost certain thing I will develop down the road. Have you seen the new Prehistoric Planet Ice Age trailer? Yes, very excited. First time chatting here. How are Christo Christodiers? I've read that word a lot. I don't think I've ever said it out loud. I think they're all extinct. Um, yeah, I think they're all extinct. Could the first children be alive on another planet? Maybe. Who knows? Who's to say? Um, why is the Blackfish Island? Did I lose the stream? Are we still good? Yeah, we're good. All right, scrolling back up, scrolling back up. Why are the Blackfish Islanders so heavily against people in the outside going to their island? Would they be more open to it if someone from their tribe was paid to do an expedition? Possibly. The reason for it is they've had really um, violent clashes with people from the Kadath Islands, and the Assembly are leasing an island from the Kadath. So um, they don't the people of the Blackfish Island and Colleen in general, honestly, are generally mistrusting of the Assembly again because the Assembly are renting land from the Free States, and the States have attacked them on numerous occasions for various reasons. So it's a defensive response. It's a very uh, dramatic and aggressive response, but once you appreciate kind of their history for it, um, I think again their response to the assembly agents may have been a bit extreme, but I think it's fair to say uh, that there was reason for their mistrust. Um, are there any fish species that have been domesticated? Yes. Again, I just haven't developed them yet. How do you do your research for Kaimere and the studies early, like the ceratopsid one you alluded to? Um, I do. I have often the research is driven by whatever episodes I'm working on. So for this one, for example, I've done a lot of research on Miocene South America. Thankfully, a lot of those papers I was able to port over from studies that I did in preparation for my crocodilian series. Was that last year or 2 years ago? Time. What is it? Um, but yes, so a lot of my research is done that way. As for stuff like the ceratopsians that I alluded to, um, I have a lot of really cool connections that I've made in the uh, paleontology and natural history at large space. A lot of people that I've gone to as consultants for various clades over the years, and I've had the honor of kind of being told about some of the studies that are in the works. Um, and that's all very exciting, but it also feels a little bit like, well, what am I going to do with this? Because again, I'm not going to break embargo. So if I know something is, what am I? Yeah. So there's it's exciting, but it also means that I'm in a little bit of a weird position sometimes where it's like, well, I want to incorporate this really cool thing I heard about, but how can I do it in a way, I don't know. What are you going to do? How are the tyrants doing at the end of their dynasty? Is the Nahamu the last one, or are there others left? I plan on the Nahamu being the last Tyrannosaur. Um, that's not set in stone. I'm open to a little bit of wiggle room, but for the most part, I think that's going to be it. I thought it was pronounced Thuniform, not Tuniform. Am I wrong? I don't know if I'm right. That is how a ecologist I spoke to who, oh gosh, a long time ago pronounced it, and so that just like buried in my head. But I don't know if that I don't know if that's correct. Make of that what you will. Will there be a video explaining Chimere's peoples, cultures, technological development, and ethnic groups? Would be very, very interesting to know. I would love to do that. Oh, ethical groups. Sorry. I would be very open and interested in doing that. But it's just a matter of time at this point. When I do my human species series in whatever form that takes, that is almost certainly going to be a major component of the Chimeran episode. Um, how the hell do homunculi work? That's more than I think I can get into right now, but basically they are um, bodies made for magic to inhabit. Um, thoughts on Nanotyrannus? Is Nahamu really last Tyrannosaur of Chimere? Thoughts on Nanotyrannus have been talked a little bit about this at this point. Between all the emails I've gotten, clearly it's something that I should make an episode on, but I don't know when that would be. Even if it's just like an informal thing, maybe talking is maybe I can film myself drawing the two species of Nanotyrannus. I would need to clear some space on my phone, but that might be fun. What is the status of ammonites? Their natural history is still canon. I know, unlike trilobites, they haven't been revisited. I think I mentioned a little bit before, there might be a few adjustments I make to the freshwater aspect of them. But I think for the most part, all the lore and designs are fine. Um, would love to have you make more art tutorials like the Harkundi one was really helpful. I would like to do that. Again, it is very demanding of space on my phone, but I got a new phone and my new phone might be able to handle it, or maybe I could use my old one, clear all the space. There's something that I can maybe do. It sounds like there's quite a bit of interest in that. Um, I saw a small armadillo coming next month for the Fable of Fai Zhemi show. I have a question. Is the Arvelith Kilotar still canon? Didn't show up last year despite being a very good opportunity. That was mostly just a matter of time, honestly. I was very time crunched for those last couple chapters of the Zentaur saga. Um, um, I plan on it still being canon, but I haven't designed it yet, and I might cut it. I'm not sure at the moment, but I think I probably will keep it. I like it. I like the basic concept I have for it. I just need to actually draw it. Something like that with a intricate armor is not something I can bang out in 45 minutes like I can with some other creatures. Um, do you have any plans about large worms or starfish in Chimere? No plans at the moment, but I would certainly be open to it. Um, what are your favorite Spec Evo projects? Again, I tend to steer away from a lot of them. Um, it's less projects and more. I've seen some really cool concepts. I think the one that comes to mind um, is by Zenworm Art. I think is the username on the social media, but Zen made this really fascinating a centaur mollusk monster that I drew a picture of at one point. Is so cool. So that's probably going to be at the top of my list, just off the top of my head. Um, would the Cyritic people make an appearance in the upcoming Fable? They sure do. Um, have you heard the new Spec Arrow series called The Age of Monotremes, which explores the idea of mammals also going extinct alongside dinosaurs and monotremes taking it? I've seen it. I've seen the first trailer. I think there's another piece of media by them out. It looks very cool. The idea of it being fully animated is very exciting. And I wish them the best. Has anyone sponsored a Permian Dynasty episode for next year? I have a Permian Dynasty episode sponsored. I don't know when that will air though. If someone made a D&D homebrew of your creatures, would you ever wish to look at it? Absolutely. I do want to do that at some point. I just need to figure out some copyright issues. Stormcrow mentioned that I can maybe look at options beyond the platform that I was originally looking to publish it on. So that's something I might do at some point, but it's unfortunately going to be a little ways down the road at this point. What made you think of the idea of the Burin aquatic pterosaur? I don't know. A lot of my ideas just, I don't know. I think that one was probably inspired by depictions of pteranodon swimming. Um, but honestly, I sometimes they just show up. Sometimes they're in, I've got quite a few creatures that were inspired by dreams at this point in the project. So uh, hard to say off the top of my head, honestly. Do you have any plans to make Spinosaurs of Kaimere? No, Spinosaurs are gone. Or talk about the Permian Islands. I'm going to be talking about the Permian Islands whenever I release this Dragon Rider story, probably early next year. I'm going to be doing a lot of art for that book. It's going to be a novella with a lot of illustrations inside. Um, so that's going to be an independent story. It's going to obviously change the cover art for the third anthology because now that one doesn't have the Dragon Rider story in it. Make of that what you will. In past streams, you mentioned that before sticking to Megaraptors, you said you considered a clade of robust Dryptosaurids. I'm curious if those ideas and how they would differ from robust monarchs. Yeah, I mean that was one of the I've the whatever the major clade of big apex theropods were in Kaimere has undergone a lot of revision over the years. I have dabbled in the idea of Megaraptorans a couple times. First inspired by that Luis Ray illustration of Megaraptor as a Spinosaur. I think was the first time I was like, "Ooh, yeah, that's cool." And that was like late high school, I think. So that was the first time that I have bounced back and forth. Dryptosaurids, I have gone back to them quite a few times. I mean, partly because I'm primarily a child of the East Coast U.S., and so having the big predators be kind of local monsters that don't get a lot of love, and they're kind of this cool radiation of tyrannosaurs that had big hands instead of really big jaws. Um, Especially exciting with this with the uh, a big old asterisk possible, not probable, um, uh, Nanotyrannus link to the East Coast tyrants. It seems quite unlikely that that's the case. It was only in one of the 8 um, analyses that Dr. Napoli and Dr. Zana ran. So I don't want to contribute to that misinformation there. A lot of people have improved. But all that to say, how would that impact them from the robust monarchs? Um, I imagine the biggest change would be in the utility of the hands, because even though they had big hand claws and were almost certainly using them a lot more actively than smaller armed theropods, Megaraptoran forearm flexibility, at least the basal Megaraptorid uh, Australovenator, I mean, the flexibility of their forearms is really what inspired my idea of them grabbing with the jaws and kind of manipulating and puncturing with the hand claws. Um, I don't think you would see that in the Dryptosaurids. And you're probably looking more at something that like grabbed with the jaws to initially restrain, and then more of a less precision and more power, maybe even just buffeting with those huge claws. Um, a very cool idea, and I think the idea of a very large one employing that buffeting strategy would be really cool. Um, but it would be a very different predator, a very different animal to the Megaraptorans that I've developed for Kaimere, where they're very precision based. You know, bite and part of the reason the Yucatan and the Zentaur have these big jaws is to restrain and hold something down so that they can then precision strike with their claws. That doesn't, so it would be different, but I think it would be very cool again to have that kind of buffeting powerhouse. Um, and if I end up making the Nehamu maybe a little bit more predatory, maybe shift it to that East Coast tyrant ancestry, which I have gone back and forth about doing that for a while now. Um, that would be cool. Cool to see another way that they might employ those another way that a theropod with big hands could employ them. Very different from Megaraptorans. Um, but there's also something to be said for I now have a lot of large theropods with big hands. And it was not the prevailing trend of the clade. Not saying that it's not likely. Again, we see with Maip that it appears that their arm and muscle attachments were not atrophied. So I'm not saying it's unrealistic. I think it's quite plausible that you could get big megatheropods as predators with large arms and big jaws. I think I now have quite a few between the kettle wreck and the what I've got planned for the crown of Kyrule. But I've already got the Nehamu with big hands, and you know what? Maybe that'd be fun. Again, it'd be very different from the precision strikes of the Megaraptorans. So that'd be cool. Are there any Ambulo-Ichthyans left within the known world? At the very least, there is one in Picardia. It's an aquatic, very basal Ambulo-Ichthyan that doesn't really walk that much. But I don't plan on many of them being in the known world. Kyrule is another story. There's probably a bit more diversity there beyond even the reliquary. Are there any true Eurypterids or Euryterids? I don't know how you would. I don't know how that's formally pronounced. I don't want to weigh in on that. I don't think so. I don't think there's any sea scorpions left. At least certainly none in the known world. The marine scorpions kind of filled that mantle for me, and I'm quite satisfied with them. How do you get the idea for creatures? Like, how do you brainstorm and make concepts? Do you use digital or traditional art when making the first ideas? I pretty much exclusively use traditional. A lot of my creatures will start off as pen and ink sketches, sometimes in sketchbooks, sometimes just as I'm working. My planner, my calendar is riddled with weird sketches of concepts, most of which I will heavily amend before turning into a real thing. As for the ideas, I mean, sometimes it's as simple as a weird creature or contraption I come across that inspires me. An example of that was the weird suction cup phone holder I encountered at an Airbnb recently. So yeah, I think it kind of depends on a lot of it's just stuff I encounter in life. I usually am inspired by natural history stuff as well. The Orchid lot, obviously the fundamentals of that were inspired by uh, the future predators of Primeval, a show I adored as when I was younger. But like the slime was inspired by the non-Newtonian slime was inspired by a project I ran with some kindergartners for like a homeschool science class back in high school. and the slime, employing that as a slime venom um, for the various Pituit Varens and Silent Ones themselves was inspired by, I'm blanking on the name, but there's a worm that ejects this kind of adhesive slime and then can eat at its leisure. Um, so my the all that to say, I can be inspired by creature design from a weird suction cup on the shower, by a science project for kindergartners, and by uh, nature documentaries from entirely different clades. I think it helps that I'm just always in this world building mode and always taking in little ideas like that. And again, that's part of why I avoid other spec projects, is that I'm not, I'm just always pulling concepts. Um Often I'm inspired by things that are completely irrelevant to creature design. So I hope that is a satisfying answer. Um, are there any dromaeosaurs in the Soritic wetlands? The blue cockatrice, or the fosnu, is a seasonal visitor, and we meet one in the Fable of Fai Zhemi. Um, there's going to be some pheasant cockatrices, but I don't think I have them set at the moment. Um, what is the reason for the design change of the Kurajaku? That's something that I've just been wanting to do for a while, make it a little bit more streamlined, to make it. I liked their coloration initially, but I think I might make that more of a individual. Like some individuals have that more of that kind of maybe almost a piebald mutation, which is what I might do for a particular one that I have in mind, so that I can keep kind of elements of that old first design. Um, and so I think I'm going to keep some elements of the old one in the big individual we're going to meet and follow in our next saga. But that was the reason, was there's just been elements that I wanted to polish for a while now, and this is just happens to be my first opportunity to really do it. Um, uh, doo, 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 doo. I remember art of the Osteodon tornus flying with a banshee gull. Are they canon in Kaimere? Um, oh gosh, was that is that the Pelagornis? Maybe. That one's still canon. I don't know if they'll still be in that genus. I don't remember off the top of my head if I refined them at all. I might scrap them. I don't know. We'll see where we go. I don't have any episodes planned on them. In your Sea Scorpion video, you mentioned that there was a line that evolved convergent body plan to the radiodonts. Did any late surviving radiodonts make it through the portal? None that I currently have planned, but I don't want to rule it out just off the cuff. Yes. Um, Green cockatrice. Yeah, there's probably going to be a pheasant cockatrice of some sort. How does the assembly handle the implications of copied life forms that aren't the original beings? Most of them don't dwell too much on that theory. It's easier to just say um, it's a teleportation thing, and you're yourself. Don't worry about it. Do, 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 do. Are the Sealy, Unsealy, and other fairy courts a thing in Kaimere? There's elements that may have inspired some aspects of that folklore. And I guess one could argue that, like, if memory serves, an earlier presentation was that Sealy just means like it's a fairy that follows the rules, and Unsealy is a fairy that doesn't. Um, I don't remember how authentic that is, so don't take that to the bank. But under that interpretation, I would say like chimerans are seelie fairies, and then homunculi are unseelie. Um, but I think that plays a little bit into kind of a more recent and I think inaccurate and perhaps unfair misconstruing of that to be seelie good, unseelie bad. And again, maybe I should pump the brakes because I want to be sure I'm conveying that correctly. But if memory serves, that's kind of the arc that has happened with the fairy Scottish folklore over the years. It's cool to see some conversation going on here. Alternative history projects, very fun. Is Picardia supposed to look like that rabbit duck illustration? When I first drew it, it was a elephant head that was flipped upside down. Picardia was Pachyderm Island, and so I've adjusted the coastline a little bit over the years, but ultimately, that's how it started. Solar punk story, very cool. Once made a Lego Greater Owlbear. That's very cool. Good to hear. Very curious, will we be able to see more of the theropod clay that traveled to Kaishel along with the parasauropods? And could they persist up north? That would be the Silophosaurs. I have one planned for just outside the known world. A couple smaller ones in Kaishel. The big ones are gone. And then there's the apex predator of the Crown of Kyrule is probably going to be another Silophosaur. I had at one point been thinking I might do a group of Tyrannosaurs, probably Dryptosaurs, but we'll see where that concept takes us. Sorry, I'm trying to zip through the last few of these. Is the Assembly actively trying to prevent the conventional discovery of Kaimere? I imagine it is at least something that they are trying to be aware of. I don't think that Kaimere is close enough to be clearly seen on a telescope. So again, further evidence against the speed of sound argument that I made at the beginning of the stream. But it's not something that they work super hard on. Is the Great Chasm from Skull Island possible to recreate in more realistic spec of projects? I mean, it's kind of easy to just put hydrothermal vents and rivers, but to achieve that biodiversity is quite difficult. I would be shocked if you could get something like that that's not very small fauna. I could, there's quite a few fish. I'm blanking on it, but there was like a fat fish or something that was found only in one like lake or river in South America, the axolotl. I don't know the exact pronunciation of it, but that's another one where I think it's endemic to like 3 small lakes or something like that. So the idea of something small having that level of specialization to a habitat, I could see that. And you know what? It's a monster movie. It's fun. Go big. But I think if you want something a little more realistic, I might say like keep it on the smaller side, but don't let that get in the way of fun design. Do you see any of your own creatures in the flesh and alive? In person, which would it be? Oh, it'd absolutely be one of the big titanosaurs. Just something alive at that size would be breathtaking. Um, Otherwise, probably the Karakai, the cat-like little firebird, just because I have a lot of affection for that. Oh goodness. Thank you all for chatting about the book and letting them know where to get it. Were there any ichthyosaurs in Kaimere? There were, but they are now extinct. Do the fishy centaurs have a sponsored episode? They don't yet. I would not be surprised if I get one down the road. I do have an episode on the reliquary that has been sponsored, so I will be working on them more. But it's not specifically on them. In my own Spec Evo project, the dominant predators are new clade of tyrannosaurs with robust arms and hooked claws, but still a bone-crushing idea. So is this idea a bone-crushing bite? So is this idea possible? I think, taking aside literature, I think it's plausible. I don't think it is likely that tyrannosaurids, or at least tyrannosaurids, are likely to develop bigger arms over time. But something that's pretty basal, like Nanotyrannus is generally proposed to be, or just go for what if Dryptosaurus but big, it might not have the level of insane osteophagy adaptations that T-Rex had. But I think you could still get away with something that has a level of bone crushing processing with robust arms and hook claws. Again, maybe with that like buffeting, bludgeoning claws could be. I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think that the notion that the arm and jaw power, the arm and neck power in large theropods is deeply mutually exclusive, I think has been over exaggerated. I think it's fair to say that there is a trend toward one or the other because there are regions of shared muscle attachment, to my understanding. So I don't think it's a completely bogus idea, but it has certainly been overstated, I think. I don't want to get too much into that, but stay tuned, I guess. Have you considered introducing a Paraceratherium to your project? Considered, yes, but I decided to go against it. The harvest that I laid out, I like, some of the harvests were chosen because of creatures that I already had in Kaimere. I knew I needed some time to take from South America. I needed some probably Miocene, given what I had as far as sloths go. So some of the harvests I laid out based on animals I already had, but now at this point, I am avoiding adding harvests. So Paraceratherium just didn't align with them. But I've got the Glanos, which is a Calicathir that occupies a very similar niche, and I'll be talking more about their relatives in February. Has anyone in the assembly tried to use an electric witch's power to recharge electronic devices? I just think that would be funny if they tried only for said device to blow up. You're going to enjoy a sequence in the ghost story that I wrote, is all I'm going to say about that. Stream's breaking up bad. I'm sorry to hear that. We're now toward the end, and I'm trying to power through these last few. It's possible for the amphibian clade. I'm aware of that clade, but I'm not gonna incorporate them into this story. I know that there's some fun possibility there, um, but I'm not gonna add them to this one. When the portal goes over a piece of land like a forest, how thorough is it in taking life? This is all theoretical. The assembly doesn't know. They've never witnessed a harvest, but theoretically, since it has taken up all sorts of insects and microbes, presumably it can be quite thorough. A lot of plants were taken from seeds, um, so it's quite thorough. Is there any news on the hyena dance in Kaimere? Um, I don't think so. I've got one that will show up as a pretty notable sequence in the second chapter of the fable, but not no big news about them. It's the Renjuyo. It's a species I've already done a focal episode on. Um, is it possible that the descendant of Eos stegosaurs from the age of crocodile Mesozoic dynasty or a closely related animal are present on the Jurassic Islands as proxies of true stegosaurs proper? Maybe. Um, Possibly. I won't rule it out, but I'm not sure off the top of my head. When it goes over, there any chance we'll get more Alcaceratops from the Ziphonodon episode? Certainly not in this series. Those are endemic to Kyrule, but yes, they are going to be, I'm sure, met again in some capacity. But the Tikaka Tik and those guys are only in Kyrule. They're not in the known world. Even if the stegosaurs are gone, do they at least last the longest in the crown of Kyrule? Probably not. I think the Jurassic Island is probably where they lasted the longest, which was up until the dynastic extinction. Will there be Noasaur characters in the Fable of Fai Zhemi? I don't know if there are characters, but I do have two Noasaurs that make appearances in the second chapter. The questing beast from the Permian continent definitely looks like it has Indricathir inspiration. It certainly does. Absolutely. How would the Forest of Bones react if someone set a drone inside? Would it leave it alone or send something to attack it? It probably would leave it alone, I would expect. And then our last question is, what is your inspiration for semi-aquatic abelisaurids? That idea felt so random. Oh, honestly, I don't remember what the inspiration was. There have been semi-aquatic abelisaurs in Kaimere as long as I can remember. I mean, certainly older than the idea of aquatic megaraptorans. Yeah, I think it was just when I was initially doing a lot of the designs for Kaimere, the concepts, which was back, back in high school. A lot of them were just kind of, what if Carnotaurus but water? I think that was kind of the yeah, I think that would be the long and short of it. Oh, last one real quick. What Chimera species would be the worst invasive on Earth? Probably the housey grass of the northern prairies. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming to this stream. I'm going to go real quick over some last minute things. The aim of this stream has been to raise funds for the art budget of Kaimere with a focus on birds, but I also wanted to bulk up the plant character art and scene sketch budget. This is going to be the Fable of Fai Zhemi, which is the series of 4 episodes that will air throughout December. Thank you so much for those who have contributed to the budget prior to this, leading up to it. And we've also got quite a bit added to the budget today throughout the stream. Thank you all so much for financially contributing. I've got links to PayPal and Venmo in the description. And there's also going to be QR codes that I'll add to the YouTube channel for those who would like to add further donations if you are so inclined. Anything that I get is going to go directly into making art for the Fable of Fai Zhemi, adding plants, fish, birds, creature, and character art for the Fable of Fai Zhemi, which I'm very excited to have debut at the beginning of December. All right. So thank you all so much for joining this stream. This has been a ton of fun to go through and answer a bunch of different questions. Again, thank you all those who donated to the Fable of Fai Zhemi. I'm really looking forward to showing you all of the wonderful creatures and plants and characters, big and small, in the month to come. All right. Thank you all again so much and have a wonderful day. Cheers, folks.